So good to see you. I thought it'd be good to just have a chat.
Right.
Essentially sort of about how we started, but obviously it's primarily you.
Right.
But there's a lot of overlap in the beginning.
Yeah.
In fact, even when I looked at lots of the stuff, I thought, oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. And yeah, it kind of made me a bit emotional, really. Looking at it.
That was a good,
Because,
it was a good moment, wasn't it?
Because I suppose, the neatest way I could sum it up is that, and obviously we've probably seen each other 4 times in the last 20 years.
I know, it's bizarre.
Or 5.
Yeah.
But there would have been a time we spoke to each other every day.
Yeah.
And when we met, you were assisting and were on a Duncan, and I was a junior art director at a shit agency. And the last shot you did for me, ironically, like in a film, was I was just starting my new agency, and I think that year you were the most awarded person at Cannes.
Right.
And you'd just done your Squares thing for Volkswagen,
yeah.
which is a sort of interesting decade, really.
Yeah.
Let's kick off formally. So where were you born?
I was born in Birmingham.
Right. And were you one of these posh kids?
I was, my parents were both deaf.
Yeah.
My mother was born deaf. My dad went deaf at 1. And they were pretty blue collar, due to their inability to.
Because they would have had less opportunities then.
Yes. So my mother worked in the factory, and my dad was a tool maker. And so I had a pretty blue collar. I was born in Moseley, which is known for its reggae. But
was it?
Yeah.
In what sense? Who came out of that?
There was a lot of big West Indian community there. Like UB40 came out of there.
Oh, really?
There's a lot. There's a big reggae scene there and big Irish scene.
And did you get into reggae then?
No, weirdly enough, I didn't.
You resisted it.
Coming out of having deaf parents, it's not that conducive to a musical.
I was going to say it's a weird thing that your parents are deaf, and one of the first things you go with that area is known for something audio based.
Yeah. I mean, if you watched, did you watch that show Small Axe, directed by Stephen Quinn? It's all about West Indians, a lot of them in Birmingham, these short films he's made. A brilliant observation. I remember that kind of world growing up. You had the the West Indian side, and you had the Irish, and you had the Indian, So it was pretty multicultural, but poor.
Right.
It was a sort of poorish neighbourhood.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, growing up, can you remember being influenced or liking any ads? Being aware of the world of advertising?
I remember these ads, and I think you do. And there were, I think Ridley might have directed them. There were hamburger ads with a little boy and a little girl in it. And they grow up in these ads.
Oh, it's Alan Parker.
Oh, it's Alan Parker.
Yeah. The Yorkshire, Ben. Yeah.
And he goes off to Australia and he says,
that's right, yeah.
He says to me, you got to miss anything? He goes, I'm going to miss these hamburgers.
Yeah.
And he goes, anything else? He goes, well, maybe I'll miss you a little bit.
Yeah.
It was really, I found that really emotional.
Well, I remember them really clearly as well, mainly because you didn't have people in ads with regional accents.
Right.
So when they first come on, I think they started in the early 70s. And they're such broad accents, it was really weird, a kid to come on talking like that,
I saw an ad in the cinema that never left me, and it was a beautiful commercial for Swish curtains.
Oh, right.
And,
what's that?
It's like Saturday night, and a man has brought a girl to his house, and he's trying to draw the curtains so they can make out, and the curtains are stuck, and he's pulling on the curtains, and eventually the whole rail just crashes down, destroying his evening.
Yeah. I don't know that one. That's funny.
Swish curtains.
And it was obviously funny, and it stuck with you.
Yeah, but...
So did that world appeal to you? Did you think they seemed clever, and I can see people engaging with them, or not really? They were
nothing had any meaning to me, I think, until I was 19 or 20.
And what about school? Were you interested in anything visual, like art or...
No.
Anything?
No.
None of that?
Well, what happened was that my dad died when I was 16. He had lung cancer. And after he passed away, my 2 best friends moved in with me, and they were really good at art. And I went off to work for British Leyland, and they went to art school.
Right.
And they were sort of hanging at my house. And eventually my mum was like...
What, they'd lived in your house with your mum?
Yeah. We all lived,
really?
they were sort of hanging for most of the week, but I'd wake up to go to my
factory,
and they'd still be up and smoking a bit of hash and looking at Van Gogh.
Trying to be like students.
And they were like, why are you going to work, And I said, well, I don't have any qualifications. So I said, well, we'll make you a box of our drawings and you just apply and see what they say.
To the art college?
Yeah.
Could you not draw? They obviously
couldn't draw.
And you did that?
I did that, and then I got an invitation for an interview, and they went, "These are remarkable drawings. we're going to make an exception and let you in." You know,
without any qualifications.
Yeah, so,
are you joking? I don't remember you ever saying that.
But I remember my mother, when my dad died, he had a camera, a Pentax Spotmatic, and he never let me near this camera. And when he died, she just gave it to me. It's yours now. And when I was at art college, I just couldn't draw, and they pulled me aside like, "Are you okay? Your drawings aren't very good."
So did they not say, "God, your drawings seem to have really gone downhill since you've been turning up"?
Are you going through something? And I went,
these little stick men that you're handing in.
So my friends could really draw, and they both went. One went to Chelsea, and one went to St Martin's.
Yeah.
Went to Central. And they were serious, and so I said, "Look, can I try photography?" And what happened was that having deaf parents helped me be a photographer, because deaf parents, they perceive the world through their eyes. Somehow it helped me.
Well, that was one of my questions I'm going to have to cross out, which is... So that was going to be one of my questions, which I was going to ask that later on, which is that must have affected... If your parents are deaf and you're primarily communicating a lot with expression and visual stuff.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask whether that must... It felt like that was in your work.
That's interesting. I mean, I somehow or another started taking photographs that people liked, and I applied to this college, Polytechnic Central London had this very good college, and I went down, and I've taken all these photographs while I was at British Leyland of all these tool makers in their overalls.
Yeah.
And it was my coursework, and I showed it to them, and they're a very left-wing Marxist college, and they were like...
So they liked all that?
It was like looking at... They were like, "Oh my God, a true proletariat kid," you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't have enough qualifications.
Again.
So they pulled me aside and they said, "Look, we love your work. We're going to offer you a place." And so I got into this college, and then, it was a bit of a blur because a lot of long words and a lot of semiotics, but it was really interesting taking photographs for 3 years, and sort of developing that. And I miss taking photographs, to be honest. I miss the purity.
So what was Was it purely you taking photographs of the time, or was it learning about the different people out there and how they did things? I mean, presumably both in a way. But
yeah, I stole a copy. I'll probably get into trouble for this.
How long ago was it now?
Long time. Statute of limitations.
I think he's probably right now. Over 25 years, I think. From their library.
I borrowed. I'm sorry, I take that back. I borrowed a book, a very important book, which I still have.
Guarantee I can edit that out for you. What was the book?
It was a Cartier-Bresson book, and it was a really beautiful book. And in it was a manifesto written by Cartier-Bresson, and it had this kind of his vision for taking photographs, which he'd broken down. And I used that as a guide to taking photographs, which was never crop your photographs, never play around with different lenses, never. It was a bit like the dogma filmmakers sort of doctrine. So
at the time, you obviously didn't know much about photography, but what as it turns out, he's lots of people's favourite photographer. But I don't know if you knew that at the time, but what made you think I'm going to adopt all these rules, these harsh rules? I think
it was a very simple framework, whereas teaching photography, the photography department, they weren't very interested in actually taking photographs. Whereas Cartier-Bresson that's all he cared about. Was, looking for the perfect image.
The moment,
Yeah.
So how did you go from learning all those long words, taking Cartier-Bresson type pictures, to assisting Duncan Sim, who was like quite a glossy advertising photographer?
I was at college with this guy, a really good guy. I don't know where he is now, Adam Tyso. And he was working for, when we left college, I was dispatch riding and making a bit of money, broke. And he said, "Come and assist this guy, James Cottier." And he was a West End guy. And I was like the third assistant. They were like, "Sweep up and stay out of sight." And if you go, I'd run around and get everything and clean up. And after hours, I would just do everything. But they would go off on location, and they would leave the studio. And I'd go
there on your own.
And I'd go in, and I'd bring my girlfriend in, and I'd take pictures of her. And I'd mess around with these 10x8s and 8x7, 7x5 and 4x5 and all kinds of. And I'd develop
stealing his film and
knocking off pictures. Was kind of when you're an assistant in London at that point, your film was processed for free. you know, and
Was it?
Yeah,
In
it was like
what
like
sense? They'd have deals at the labs.
The labs would encourage you to process it for free, knowing that when you became a photographer, you know.
You pay
So
them
I was just using his unused facilities, you know, and I'm sure Jim would be very good about that now.
It's a veritable crime sheet we've got here. You're stealing books from libraries, getting into colleges without the right degrees, and stealing.
But I remember there was a friend of mine who assisted a very well-known photographer in Islington,
Right.
and we used to make an appointment, and I would drive around on my motorcycle, and he would throw out boxes of Polaroid,
Oh my God!
and I would drive off with them, and that would sustain me in my next, my
Amazing.
shoots that I was
And
doing.
who was that? Just in case he's listening. Are you kidding? Is it really? Was it?
Yeah, I got to know Nadab a little bit, but I'm sure. But you know,
He won't be sending you a bill for that, I don't know. So, and what kind of pictures were you taking with this sort of stolen Polaroid and films?
you know, I had a girlfriend who I was at art college with, and she was a fashion model, became a house model at Norman Hartnell, who was the Queen's.
Yeah.
So she used to walk about there every day. Really, really lost art now. And I used to take her clothes off, and I would do pictures of her, actually clothed and unclothed.
Yeah.
And so I built up a series of photographs of her to try and develop a portfolio. And I was taking pictures of anything I'd get my hands on, really.
So I can remember. So obviously we met on that shoot in Scotland, where my memory is, God, you were treated poorly.
Yeah, Duncan.
So we'd been, I think it's Glencoe, a sort of big open wasteland of a place that's howling wind, and there'd be a truck, because it was a Kawasaki shoot, with the bikes on.
Yeah.
And I remember once Duncan saying, right, should we all get back to the hotel and eat? And everyone's like, yay. And he went, except for Malcolm, you can sleep in the truck with the bikes.
Well,
and then you think, oh, that seems bad. We were all going off to a warm hotel and you've got to sleep the night here. And then what was worse is we'd come back the next day, having all been fed and probably drunk and in the evening, and turn up. You'd be asleep and he'd go, right, Duncan, Malcolm, let's go. And you'd wake up and within less than a minute you'd be moving stuff around. You hadn't even...
Well, that night you left me there alone. I bedded down to sleep across the seats of the van. There was a knock on the window, and it was a local assistant we were using. And he said, "My mum thinks she'd like some stew,
amazing.
and some bread." And it was like hot, and it was brilliant, and some tea in a flask. And I was like, "Yeah, thank you." I had this lovely hot meal and full night's sleep.
Well, I think it's just seems so harsh. It seemed harsh then. It seems harsher now. People don't do things like that, I don't think.
Yeah.
But so we got to know each other because we would, from memory, we'd smuggle you food out, like breakfast and things, because you weren't part of the grown-ups. You were like the person who wasn't allowed to eat properly, or I don't know, it was just a weird thing. Yeah. So me and Alistair would sort of hang out with you a bit and got to know you there.
No, I remember he said to me, Duncan, those signs we're going to put on the road are too tall. You need to saw off, make them 12 inches shorter. So we're in the back of the truck and I'm sawing away. And it's pouring with rain, and I can see you, Alistair, and Duncan playing snooker, having drinks.
Yeah.
But it was a really, really strong learning experience, fast learning.
So what did you learn from that? Because obviously it sounds harsh, and and that's how it was. There was sort of, I think at the time, it seemed like there was a vibe that you had to be a bit like being at public school or something, I'd imagine, the way you had to be really tough on the assistants to help them in some way.
Yeah.
What made you go through that sort of... How long did you assist Duncan for?
2 years.
2 years.
I was an assistant for about 3 years. I never really travelled at all. So I got to travel, which was a dream of mine. You know, like my dad never went abroad in his whole life, you know.
Yeah.
So, but Duncan could make and build a shot really well. Yeah. You know, he could set up a scene and light it well. So I learned that from him.
Right.
How to foreground, midground, background.
Right.
To combine
so
those
he was good
elements.
at that stuff. He was ex-John Claridge. So,
yeah, exactly. You know.
Yeah.
He had a strong visual technique, which I learned from him. And he was very ambitious. He was mad, but he was very ambitious and passionate.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy.
And the only other thing I remember from that shoot, which is probably the scariest thing I've ever done, is is we had to shoot a bike driving around the mountains from behind. And it said, I think the line said, give your heart a good workout. And it was like this scary bike blurring past, driving past these mountains that were a big drop. And Duncan did it all day, strapped to the front of an old Land Rover.
Range Rover.
There was like a little bit of metal that, I don't know whether you'd mocked up. There was like a chain and a bit of a platform.
We designed and built that platform.
Obviously that would never get past anything today,
No,
health and safety. It was sort of a little platform. And then you belt after the bike as far as you can, bouncing up and down. He was chained on, trying to slide around, taking the picture. I mean, it's insane because he could have gone over the edge of the mountain and the car could have, it was ridiculous. But at the end of the shoot of him doing it, God knows, 50, 100 times, he went, the art director's got to do it now. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to bottle out. So I did it. It was absolutely fucking terrifying. So I had a camera and you were driving and it was just terrifying. I was sliding around on this platform in front of a Range Rover.
That's amazing.
That was sliding backwards and there was a mountain one side. But I was chained to it, but I could have gone under the wheel. I mean, it was just
awful.
Yeah, it's just, now and again, I think of that and think, I should have just bottled out. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But anyway, so they were my two main things I remember from that shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I really got a lot out of working for Duncan. It was painful.
Yeah.
Absolutely painful.
So the next thing I remember is you coming in to see me, I don't know how long afterwards, with a book.
Yeah.
So, and I heard you mention this on a podcast. So my memory of that is great. Malcolm's that lovely guy we met on the shoot. He's going to become a photographer and he's going to show me his pictures. Now, of course, your pictures were reportage pictures. And at the time, advertising didn't really use reportage. It was all glossy. It was all like Jim Cotier or Duncan. It was all very glossy stuff. And I can remember there was one that I liked, but I couldn't have at the time ever imagined it, an ad of a guy running out of a factory, blurring. Yes. And they're all very, I think there was another one, it might have been a relative in a chair smoking or something. They were quite sort of downbeat, real, black and white, grainy. They're sort of the opposite of whatever advertising was then. It wasn't that. So kind of my heart sunk a bit because I thought, I can't imagine any ads with these pictures in.
Yeah.
What's he going to do? He's so nice. I can't think what he's going to do. I can't really remember what happened after that, but then gradually, I remember giving you a few jobs. You shot my nan.
Yeah.
For 50 quid. I remember when you did that, I probably haven't told you, but I said to my nan, can you dress in black and white? For some reason, I thought it's more, because obviously I didn't really know how you'd do it. And I thought, well, if it can go less wrong if she's in black and white and it's going to be shot in black and white. Obviously, it doesn't make any difference. But you did a little job that we were talking about where I gave you this little job just to give you some money, really. But it was Aspreys.
Yeah.
3 plates on a blank background. And then horrifically, I don't know whether you remember this, I went to the shoot. So I think the fee was about 250 quid. And I think the plates were worth about 200 quid each. And when I came to the studio, horrifically, they were, rather than you being above the plates from the top, they were stuck on the wall with elephant gum, which I nearly shat myself. Thought, fucking hell, if they fall down, why would you not put the camera above the plates than stick them to the wall? I think that was the first couple.
What was my excuse?
I think you were like, no, it's not under control. I just thought, if one falls, that's the cost of the shoot, you know. I don't know, really. I mean, it's easy in retrospect to go, you just put the camera above, but they were all stuck to the wall with elephant gum. But, none broke and it was fine.
I think getting the camera up high may have been a problem.
Maybe you just didn't have the kit. Maybe I don't know. Or didn't, I mean, you weren't used to shooting that sort of still lifey stuff.
With a plate camera getting up and over a plate camera, you need a rig to be able to view and focus and perfect.
Maybe. There's obviously it's funny, it was a plate camera even at the time and it was only a little ad, but...
Yeah.
And then I remember seeing you did a shot of Hannah outside in the City of London that got into AFAP.
That's right.
Which was a big jump up. Yeah. And I thought, I quite like that. Yeah. That seems like better than the previous ones. And then the next step up for me was you brought in a picture of Hannah, black and white, nude from behind with a little string,
Yeah.
like a tampon string dangling down. So there's a couple of things with that. One, it seemed like it looked like $1 million. All of a sudden, it looked like a sort of, to me, a Richard Avedon type thing. It just looked such a jump up in quality, the whole feel of it, and just looked amazing. I thought, God, it looks really good and expensive, and it's only a test, I think, wasn't it?
Right.
So I pinned it up on my wall in the agency, Edwards Martin Thornton, and because of the content, there was a little petition went around for me to take it down because it was a tampon, which seemed outrageous at the time. You think, what's my wall? You know, what's that got to do with anyone? It's art. It's not It's not like some sort of erotic thing. It's just an
observation, yeah.
lovely looking thing. But it seemed like the first thing you think, God, that looks amazing. I don't know why that seemed like a jump up, or whether you thought that, but to me, it's like it seemed a massive.
You know, I went and got myself a loan and bought this 4x5 Japanese camera called a Vista, made of rosewood and leather.
Right.
And I started processing my own film and then going to a rental darkroom. So I was taking more control over that side of my production. So things started to look cleaner, I think.
Yeah.
Black and white is much easier to
So
do.
what, that was with the new camera, so it
Yeah.
was just a bit more considered,
Yeah,
I suppose. And I suppose also at the time, that was more like the kind of thing, apart from the content, I guess, but that you might come across in advertising. I think advertising is a bit more diverse in the sense that you could get reportage, you can get all sorts of stuff. Then it felt like the shots had to be quite glossy and sophisticated.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. It was like one guy doing reportage. What was it? Graham Westmore.
Graham Cornthwaite.
Cornthwaite. That's
Yeah.
him. Graham Cornthwaite.
He was great. Yeah, he was like the only one, wasn't he?
Yeah. And then there was
That's
Don
true.
McCullum.
It was one thing. He did some police stuff.
Yeah.
And it started to change a bit, I suppose.
Yeah. But then it was all 10x8 Graham Ford, wasn't
Yeah.
it? You know.
Yeah, it was all dominated by 10 by 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it was interesting, that shot. I think I started to want to be more provocative.
Right.
You know, because it was all very well shooting a nude, you know, but confronting like the menstrual cycle
Yeah.
suddenly became.
Well, it was a clash between the sort of beauty and that menstrual cycle thing, and just it being one little tiny white string that sort
Yeah.
of popped out visually.
Yeah.
I thought it looked great.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think so then we did a few of these early things.
Yeah.
So the other thing I remember, and I remember it as being a absolutely anxiety-induced shoot, was an ad, probably off the back of that shot in a sense. So it was an ad for the Lighting Federation.
Oh, yes.
And the idea was, it was a secretary holding up a little pad, naked, holding up a little pad in front of her breast so you can see it. And it said something like, it was about the bad effects of office lighting. Some sort of sexism-based line on office lighting. So it wasn't the fact that she was naked. It was something to do with the fact that she was wearing glasses. So we went on the shoot. I don't know whether you remember these things.
I do. I've got a vivid memory.
We went on the shoot. You cast an American model, I seem
Yeah.
to remember. And then we set it all up. And I said, "Oh, she's got her clothes on. What's the..." And you went, no, don't worry, it's all under control. So I said, oh, okay. So you shot her for hours and hours and hours, fully clothed. And I said, what's the story? She's still got her clothes. What are we testing? What's the story? And you went, I think handling this, it's always best to ask her at the end of the day.
Oh, my God.
So do you remember this?
I do remember it really well.
So I was like, oh, my God. So she doesn't know. So, not yet. I think this is the best way to go. We, get to know her a bit. So I was thinking, this is horrific. So we're getting to know her a bit, and then we're going to say, can you get your kit off? So I was just thinking, oh my God, I feel awful. It's making me stressed. At some point, someone's going to say, do you mind if you get your clothes off? So at that point, quite late, I think presumably you must have said...
I did. I'll give you my version in a
Go
minute.
on, you give me your version. So this is what I remember, and that could be, is you said that she had a bit of a meltdown and phoned her agent, and then somewhere some extra money was brokered, and then slightly uncomfortably she did it.
She did it. She was great. But I remember I was dating a girl at the time Patricia Murphy, director,
Yep.
who worked with her on a commercial, and she said, "Do you know Malcolm Venville?" And she said, "Yes." And she went, "What a total amateur."
Oh my God. This is after we'd shot it.
Yeah. And it was, what's so beautiful about photography is it forces you to deal with uncomfortable things. Like I had to ask her, like, can we do it naked? And I didn't ask her.
So you'd avoided asking her up front because you felt uncomfortable?
I felt totally uncomfortable about it. And I was just a quiet little boy, really. And I think, having to say, like, can you take your clothes off was a huge step forward for me.
Right.
And
wow.
Yeah. And nowadays I would have absolutely no compunction. I'd be like, right.
Because it seems funny in retrospect that if you felt uncomfortable with asking her to take your clothes off, you'd leave it to the end of the shoot where there's then so much pressure and it's awkward and it feels so gratuitous rather than the job.
Yeah.
At least if you say, this is what we need, someone naked, you're not there to ask, but to leave it at the last minute. It was
I feel awful about it right now, but I don't know why. But yeah, I didn't,
Well, it's all part of the learning thing of,
She was so, like, great. And so, she was so, I just didn't have, like, and I knew that if I'd asked her there and then at the beginning of the casting, will you do it with your clothes off? She would have gone, no. Or she would have come back with, there's just no. And she was so far ahead of everyone else.
Oh, what? So you thought, I don't want to lose her?
So I thought, I'll just push it, and it's really bad, terrible kind of business practice.
But these are all very early days. It's like a year in or something. So you don't really know all these things, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it was really, and also the day of the shoot, I had this stylist, and it was interesting. I didn't even know who she was. She was a stylist. Somehow she got hired, and she brought this awful suit. I went, no, it's like it was an awful. So I went myself to Angels.
Right.
And I got this beautiful suit out, which worked out beautifully in the end. And it forces you, photography, into making key decisions.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that way.
Well, I think in the end, we didn't use the nude one.
Yeah.
I can't remember why. And the other one was great. So again, it was like slightly like a Richard Avedon-y 50s.
Yeah.
It had a beautiful feel to it.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that was printed by Klaus Calder. Had you started doing that?
I think I printed it myself at that point.
But it's got a real class. And I think what I remember is with lots of things that we did, you saying, we've got to do it daylight. We've got to do it daylight.
Yeah, daylight.
Not wanting to use lights, which again was very unusual at the time. Most people wanted to, light things to death.
It's absolute magic. I mean, if you look at early Avedon or early Pen, 50s and 60s, it was all daylight. Because and you can see they're still around in London, north-facing studios that were built in the 19th century.
Yeah,
you get amazing light. I mean, it's magic. And they're hard to get into or hard to use.
Are they?
It doesn't fit for commercial, work anymore. But
you can still see, even with that image, it just has got a certain quality that feels great.
Well, it's part of that Cartier-Bresson kind of doctrine of like.
Yeah, well, I suppose you're just almost coming out of it, but.
Like cropping photographs was a problem for me, I remember. I would if a friend was cropping a picture, I'd have to question my relationship with them.
But it's interesting that particularly today, where obviously most pictures that you meet, your first thing is, look at the retouching. Look at what they've done with the you don't really see it as an image. They're so heavily manipulated, and I mean to imagine that anyone did anything in camera now is weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think for the better, because I don't think photography's necessarily got any better.
No, I agree. It's just such a different business now, different game right now.
Yeah.
When we were starting out, retouchers, they'd been around since the 19th century, with little brushes and eyeglasses. That hadn't changed. I think in that period of time when we were working, it was just coming. But
it felt like cheating, didn't it? Retouching a bit.
It did, yeah.
So, for example, that shot, I don't know whether there's any retouching, but it's quite likely there wasn't any. Whereas it's unusual to see any shot now that isn't retouched.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, replacing skies.
But it's odd. It's not got better, is it? It's not like the availability of all these things you would imagine would make things better. But.
Yeah, it's a big conversation, isn't it? Because photography. I remember when I used to go to buy, camera equipment or rent camera equipment, and you go to Keith Johnson and Pelling, KJP, and you go in there and they make you a cup of tea, and they were like, "What are you thinking about?" And you talk, and they show you new stuff. And then I went back a few years ago to get a cable release, and there was like 500 people lined up there You,
Oh,
you
really?
had to
Why?
pull it because everyone's a photographer.
Oh,
now.
I see,
You know,
right.
it's like, you know, back when we were starting, it was much more, you know, much more kind of quieter business.
So what's been gained, do you think, rather than me moan on about
I mean,
stuff? What's better?
it's you know, shooting digitally is amazing. You know, you can shoot and then post-produce yourself very, very quickly. You know, and it's very very liberating. It's very democratic now. It's like taking a photograph was very expensive back then.
Yeah.
You know, you have a 10x8 camera. You know, you need lenses, Polaroid film, 2 or 3 assistants, studio space, equipment, lighting. It was a capitalist enterprise.
Yeah. Which worked out well for you, I think. So one thing I was going to ask with your dad is, I remember going to an exhibition of your dad's stuff,
Of
your dad's photographs.
Really?
Yeah, you put on an exhibition.
did I?
And I can remember one particular picture that went up the stairs that was of you with a duck egg in your hand.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember where you put it on, but there was like a range of his photos that
was
you'd
it?
got
Yeah.
and blown them up.
Oh, I have them on my phone.
And obviously, and I can remember one with a path that sort of winded up into
yes,
distance,
yeah.
but they're beautifully constructed, particularly for someone who wasn't a photographer.
Well, I think when you're a deaf person and you take a photograph, you've got 100% commitment to the visual,
Yeah.
to the visual experience.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at college, I gave my mother a camera and I said, go off and shoot everyone at work. And I present, and they were like, no, you didn't take them, so you can't present them. Nowadays, I would have gone, fuck you, I'm presenting these. Because they were so strong. You know,
Well, they're your mum's pictures.
the pictures that you saw, that was my dad and my mum. And they're all super strong, you know, when deafness is so...
They're all very well constructed and considered. And,
Yeah.
I can remember particularly the one of you as a kid, I think in a stripy T-shirt.
Yeah.
Because you walked up the stairs and there was an egg in your hand, and you follow the hand up as you go up the stairs, and then you were at the top.
I'm trying to remember that. This is insane. Let me show you that picture. I don't want to ruin the...
It's all right. We can have a little pause.
Hang on, where is it? Right here.
Have you got that there?
Yeah, I got it right here. Where is it?
It's funny because I wouldn't have... Oh, yeah, there you go. It's funny. I remembered it the other way around, but yeah. God, that's weird.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
I mean, that looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What would you have shot those on then?
It would be on the Pentax
So,
Spotmatic.
I can't think where you would have had that exhibition then.
I can't remember.
Because I can remember that as like 3 foot
Can you?
long going up some stairs.
My memories is so...
Yeah, you put on a little exhibition
Really?
of your dad's stuff. I
wonder
can't
where
think
that was.
when or where.
Was it in
but-
my studio?
Oh, where?
My studio.
No, it was in a somewhere, I think. Well, because you didn't have stairs like that. It would have been... It was more of a
Really?
thing than that in your studio. Because you liked his pictures. And
Yeah. I looked at them a lot, you know, because they had a purity and a simplicity about them, you know, that was...
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, like, I remember working with this photographer when I got out of college, and I did a couple of days with him, and we were doing some quash ad, I remember, with an alien drinking quash through his ear, and he must have had 15 or 20 lights, and I was like, oh my God, this is killing me. And every time I stepped on somewhere, I'd knock something over, and all I was looking for was simplicity in production and in the way of seeing, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The two. Your dad was a draftsman.
He was a draftsman, yeah.
So again, there's a sort of constructing, laying things out. Stuff.
Yeah, it's all about...
That comes in.
Yeah, the drawing board is a frame, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I think one of my strong memories of work, you know, when we used to hang out was Derek Haas.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, about how interesting he was.
Yeah, Derek was like the first good art director probably I worked with or for. And he was quite eccentric.
He was eccentric.
Sort of brilliant, impulsively brilliant, but quite unusual. I'm trying to think whether you shot some stuff with him before we worked with him, or whether it was the same time.
No, he asked me to shoot some ads for Alistair Little, that restaurant in Soho.
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh my God, I went back about 3-4 times, you know, just to...
With shots?
Yeah, well, I went back and he was like, no, can you reshoot this, come left a bit. But I really liked him, you know. He
was great,
you know, there was a sadness to him, wasn't there? There's a lot going on in his life.
Yeah, I think he was quite insecure, but he was brilliant. So I remember when, also coming back to you, when me and Mike first went to Publicis, and he was there, and we were sort of one of the junior teams. He absolutely loved an ad that we'd done. That's how we got to know him, which was the IPA ad, with a load of pencils in.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I love that ad. He said, the only thing is it should have been colour. It's possibly true, but it wasn't an option at the time. We didn't think we could change the brief. But he absolutely loved that. But what's funny now is I can remember that was shot on the back of a layout pad.
Right.
And I think we adapted the pencils between. There's no model maker.
No.
Just cutting and using bits of glue and made the things ourselves. And it got into D&AD. I think it was my first piece of printed work in D&AD.
I was just looking at it today and I was like, oh my God, all those little agencies.
Yeah.
You know, remember those? It
All
was
gone.
all creative shops, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, knocking out really interesting work. You know.
Yeah, they're all pretty good on that.
It was all about winning awards then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was, you know, I remember when Derek was just, we'd talk about D&AD.
Yeah.
It meant so much
Yeah.
to all you guys, right?
Everyone.
Yeah.
It was everything. So, you know, so I think when we were saying earlier that, you know, that when I got my first big break was at Simon's Palmer.
Yeah.
And Mark hired me on all the stuff I'd done that he'd call the extracurricular stuff,
Right.
all the free stuff that wasn't at the agency, and nearly all that you'd shot for nothing. So it was all those bits and pieces like the IPA thing. There was I think we both got to know Mark through, you were in the back of a retouching house called O'Connor Dowse.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do an ad, and you said, "Oh, my mate will do it for you for nothing."
Yeah.
And then cunningly, me and Mike come up with a concept that involved using 5 of the best art directors that we wanted to meet in London.
Yeah.
That was useful for you as a
Yeah.
photographer, and useful for me as potential employers.
Oh, it was brilliant.
And all those people we couldn't get book crits with, or you couldn't get your book into. I don't think you'd met them before either.
No, it was great.
So Mark Denton was one, Mark Reddy. So obviously I ended up working for Mark. I ended up working with Mark Reddy. I'm trying to think who else there was. Derek, who I worked with. Graham Fink, who I didn't. And Gaskin. I think we asked Paul Arden and Alan Waldy, who both said no for whatever reason. But it was a good... And again, that got into Creative Circle somewhere, but it was another bit of publicity. It got in some things, moved the ball on a bit.
It was great for them. I mean, it's a classic idea. It was, you know, how an agency or a creative can help a brand.
For O'Connor Dowse?
Yeah, because they were like...
lots of famous people in it, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like, you know, how do we elevate and broaden? It did wonders for them.
So it's funny, because that was obviously at the beginning of what was their retouching system called? That probably cost them £1 million. Was it Cytex?
Yeah, really lumbering, great big
It's funny
digital.
now, probably couldn't do what's on the average Mac.
Oh,
but,
on a cell phone, probably.
but it's like £1 million piece of kit they were trying to maximise.
Yeah.
So I think, it's interesting that, because obviously there was a dual thing that we're getting them in for our ad, but we're also getting them in sort of thinking, well, let's give it a week and then phone up and say, do you want to see my book?
Well, that I remember that distinctly. It was like, listen, how to get ahead.
Yeah.
You know, it was like just strategic thinking, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit of a strategy.
Yeah.
But I think also what I remember from that as well is you working with the expressions of each person that was appropriate to what they were doing. So in particular, obviously I've still got a rough layout of the early one. And it's just cut out heads on these different things. There's a curl, there's someone who's fat or whatever. But I think, and I don't know whether this comes back to you observing things because of your parents, but so for example, Mark Reddy, he was on a spring, but rather than shooting his head or shooting his body at an angle, he was reacting as if he was a spring. It sounds obvious now, but in retrospect. So he was sort of bouncing around. So consequently, when we had all the assets, they fitted really well. It was better than just taking a portrait of someone and then doing that to them in retouching, because when you had him as a spring, it sort of, his expression fit. The same with Mark. I think he was holding his belly, which was a small thing, but he was fat. Just putting his hand on his belly was just a tiny little nuance that just made it slightly better. So each of those things just slightly improved in the way you shot them.
I think it's in a way, I mean, the work you do, or what I've tried to do, is you just try and bring an element of wit and levity to it, just to make something which is thoughtful and interesting a bit more evocative.
I suppose that seemed to. So how much later did you then meet Mark? I mean, I think first you did some stuff with Andy Mackay.
Yeah, Andy
didn't you?
Mackay, because I ran into him at Simon's Palm. I was taking my book around, dragging it around, back in those big metal boxes, and he was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" He was from Birmingham too.
And what, the same school, or?
Yeah, he was at the same school as me. He was like a couple of years older than me, and he was like, "What are you?" And he like sent me off to shoot a couple of things that were. They didn't even have the business, but I shot them for him.
But a great opportunity in retrospect.
Yeah.
I mean, Simon's Farm was probably the best place in town at that time.
Yeah.
So getting a couple of free tests was a big step
great.
forward.
Yeah, and I remember they moved to Soho from Covent Garden. They were in Covent Garden, and when they moved to Soho, they kind of expanded, and I was around a lot. Like they wanted shots done, and I would just shoot whatever they had. I was just up the road, and I started to kind of kick about with them. They'd like, "Can you just shoot this football for a Nike ad?" So I'd just sweep up everything for them.
So you did a few tests, which is funny in retrospect now, but they felt like high pressure things. There's a chance of doing this. I think you did one with hair over someone's eyes, like Herb Ritz thing.
Yeah, that was for like a feminine product.
Yeah.
And
then what else? Well, there's obviously a point where they thought, yeah, we like him and he's good, and then you got a step up of rather than
they were doing
can
these,
you do this?
They were doing these terrible ads, for the Sun, like Graham Taylor turnips and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was
if I needed
a
a
bit later.
turnip, and I'd shoot some, I'd do all that kind of stuff for them. And then Tiger was there, and Mark. It was Mark and Chris and Andy.
Yeah.
There was Mark Goodwin.
Yeah.
Then you came.
I was there a bit later.
And
Yeah.
Tony Barry was there, I think.
Tony Barry. And
there was the whole. So it was a really good little like hotbed. And I just made myself available.
But it's interesting to me. So you seem to do everything from, as you say, a football that could have been used as a 2-inch thing in a press ad, to a Nike poster where the whole 48 sheet is your image. So from their most premium things to their most low rent things, it's like anything that needed a photograph at one point.
Yeah,
they were coming to you. So obviously you did things like I seem to remember the first things that seemed like a step up from those little tests, and I could be wrong, was the BT things.
Yeah, the BT was great. That was amazing because.
So that was based on the American illustrator. What's he called?
Norman Rockwell.
Yeah. So was that the first one where it felt like this has gone up from? Can you try these little tests or these little free things? No, actually, I'll tell you what it was before that. Of course, it was the Wrangler.
Oh, Wrangler. Now, Wrangler was really important because
so that was that was the first proper one, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were shooting with like Brian Griffin and superstar photographers, and I just knew I could generate not wide shots because I just couldn't afford, but I could generate really high level, tighter shots like the black guy as the Superman and the Man Ray shaven head. I could do these tighter shots really well for them, and I was saying to them, "Give it to me, I'll do it." Yeah, and they were like, "Shoot," and I'd shoot it, and it would be my cost. But
so they'd say, "Well, go on." They'd take you at your word, but not give you any money. Yeah. And then if they liked it, they'd use it.
And then gradually, when BT and Nike, they were starting to feed me work, and it just got bigger and bigger, and we became friends in a way.
So I remember from those Wrangler ads, which to me felt like a massive step on because it's for a really good agency. They were really good ads. They were really good shots. They didn't feel like there was any financial limits on them. There obviously was, but it didn't feel like that. I'm trying to think. You did, but what I was going to say is what I think you brought to them, which was interesting for me when we used to hang around together, was that you knew lots about the history of photography, which most photographers didn't. Most photographers were in advertising. They'd come from assisting someone in advertising and had done whatever advertising that photographer had done, and then they were in charge of the lights and the cameras, and they'd do that. Whereas you would say that one could be based on that Man Ray thing. This could be based on this. We could use the colours from. So you were bringing lots of reference points to it that I think were unusual at the time because most advertising photographers were in the world of advertising.
Yeah, there was that kind of blindness to. It was all about being in the moment, wasn't it? With those guys, it was all like let's shoot. And but for me, I was going back to the beginnings of photography. In the same way you were going back to like Bill Bernbach changed the game, didn't he? Remember Bill Bernbach said, and you said it to me once, and it stuck with me. Was if it works, you can shoot it on a white background.
Yeah,
and it applies to you know,
anything really.
just as long as it's a simple idea. And so in the same way, I would go all the way back, you know, past Bill Brandt, all the way down to Henry Fox Talbot, you know, or, Julia Margaret Cameron, or, you know, I would admire all those photographers, and I would study how and why they took those pictures, you know, and that really enhanced my career, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's not many people brought lots of things like that. I know Nadav is into reference, but it felt like you brought very different flavours to those pictures. I seem to remember the Wrangler Man one, that you spent a lot of money on the costume, possibly all of the budget that you had to shoot it.
Yeah.
You had one made, didn't you?
Yeah, but she was actually by one of those hatters in Piccadilly, was known for its hatters.
Right.
She was mad as a hatter. I think she had some kind of lead poisoning. But, you know, there was this woman, what was her name now? She was a really top model maker. I spoke to her once. What was her name? She was really...
Not the one in Camden.
what was her name? She was a superstar.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, can you make this? And she was like, how much she got? And she just laughed at me. So I went...
The American... Oh God,
yeah, she was American.
Yeah.
So I went to this hatter in Piccadilly, and she said, "Oh, I'll make that for you."
Shirt Sleeve Studio. Can't remember her name. Yeah.
Yes, that's her.
Nancy Fouts. Yeah.
Nancy. Oh my God,
she was brilliant. Yeah.
So I actually spoke to that. I ran into her a few years ago. Was it at some dinner, and she was like, we were laughing about that. She was a superstar then. But,
yeah, she was.
But they couldn't afford to do, and it also looked better, I think, rather than going to an esteemed model maker. Yeah. It had a kind of different.
It had a personality. A certain personality.
Yeah, and brilliant characters. You know, they're all sort of vanished now. You know.
And then the Underpants Man you did.
Oh yeah.
Which was Ben Priest's one of his first ever ads.
Right.
Which obviously he
was he working with Kiki Kendrick then?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Maybe Peter Suter was at the time.
Okay. But yeah, those were great. I mean, I really like Mark had a really strong grasp on print and poster.
Yeah.
You know, he had a really particular style, didn't he? Very dominant, strong. That's how I met Ron Muick through
of
Mark,
course.
you know.
So the next thing was probably the BT. So that's obviously a next level up in terms of technical ability, I would have thought. So you're sort of mimicking the, what's his name? The American illustrator?
Rockwell.
Rockwell.
Yeah.
And you've got to tell a story via the images.
Yeah.
There's a casting was obviously
Yeah.
crucial. You've got 6 images, is it, per poster?
Yeah, 6.
So it's quite a technical challenge, isn't it? I mean, it's not an easy job. It's not, a simple picture.
It's
Simple ads, but obviously you did them really well.
Well, I think with Mark and Chris, you know, they were so casting driven.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They'd work, you know, all the ads they'd ever done, the comedy stuff they'd done they were always using interesting talent.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so, and it was just, you know, once you've got a really good actor, you know, it's effortless, really. You know, you cover the gamut of...
So what did you pick up from them, do you think, at that period?
I think it was all about the story, all about the idea. Yeah. You know, it was all, you know, in those BT ads, it was all about wit and charm and levity.
Yeah.
You know, it was all about the vibrancy of life. It was very positive.
Yeah.
You know, they were really strong in that department.
Yeah. But again, it's that same sort of vibrant, the people sort of pop out, really. They're sort of expressions and stuff.
But, you know, the thing is, there's a lesson there as a photographer or working in the business, you know. It was like, I made myself available to them and they responded, you know, we went on for years. It was a really good relationship.
How long did you shoot for them for?
4 or 5 years,
quite
longer.
A ton of stuff.
Tons of stuff.
Tons and tons of stuff. And also you did Mark's personal stuff.
Yeah, I shot all, he wanted...
his family portrait.
His family portrait. Which
was that the first personal stuff that you did?
Yeah. And then
so that was all of his ancestors. That was Mark.
Yeah, Nobby Bottom Shuffle.
Dressed as his ancestors.
Yeah.
Which were funny. And
Fireguard the Fearless.
Yeah, but they were, again, that's another, not an easy thing to do in a sense. It doesn't seem to me anyway. You know, using Mark in different outfits and wigs in different...
Yeah, he loved being in front of the camera, didn't he?
Yeah.
You know, he was an actor, Mark.
Yeah.
You know. So was Chris, you know. They just brought a really interesting energy to their work. You know, they're all about like energy and positivity and like, you know, it was funny.
Is can-do.
Yeah.
And Nobby Bottom Shuffle.
Yeah.
Who, Mark told me the other day that one of his producers was friends with the football coach in Kes, what's his name?
Oh, Brian Glover.
Brian Glover.
Yeah.
And Brian Glover was looking at the knobby bar, laughing his head off. And Mark says, now, God, I wish I'd got him to read out all the things.
Oh,
He
my
would be
God.
the perfect voice to read through. He said he was just looking at them, laughing his head off. Obviously, he's brilliant in Kiss.
Well, there's a movie to be made about Nobby Bomb Shuffle. You know, it's like
Yeah.
a Junot and Caro style, you know, comedy, French style
Yeah.
comedy about this heroic football player.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Lou Roll.
So, and what was the first thing you did with Tom and Walt? Was it the Kiss
It was
posters?
Kiss. It was Kiss.
The
yeah.
posters?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that the one with the multiple images? There was tons of images
Yeah.
on one thing.
Yeah, I barely remember them now, but it was all about music is life, and it was, you know, they had all these people with ghetto blasters and on their heads.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
Yeah, and they were really strong. You know, they were really graphic and simple, and you know, and I started working for them. Again, same sort of deal. They were really interesting.
What stuff did you do with them apart from Kiss?
Well, I'm trying to think now. I did a lot of portraits of them,
Yeah.
and I started doing stuff for them here and there. I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Portraits were good.
Sorry?
The portraits were good.
Yeah.
Of
They
Walt
were-
and
They were
Tom
really.
and Walt.
There was a group of creatives in London that I really liked. It was Dave Dye, and Andy Mackay, Walter, Tom, and Klaus, of course,
Yeah.
was a printer.
Well, there was that little
There was this
rhyme that-
hardcore unit, Chris and Mark Reddy. There was this hardcore unit of people I really liked to work with, and we all spoke the same language.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't any agents involved or anyone go-betweens. It was all. All I wanted to do.
I don't remember you having an agent for a long, or you would hire assistants and say you can rep me, or
Yeah,
you
I did-
didn't have like one of those famous agents who.
No, I didn't. I mean, I did get an agent called Dave Gardner I loved,
Yeah.
you know, but he didn't really deal with any of that work. He'd like go off to abroad and get. But,
Well, you had all your own clients. didn't you,
yeah,
really.
yeah. I just wanted to. I mean, it's all. I realise now that making images is such a privilege.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful experience. Even when on the worst print ad you've ever done, still when you address something with a camera, that's what I live for.
So I'd say the next big step up was, I can remember you saying Mark Reddy's given me a campaign, in fact 2 campaigns,
Yes.
and that was the sort of both excited and terrifying.
Yeah.
And I sort of looked at those the other day, the ads, and what I particularly remember from you doing that was that you'd found an old picture of an attic with a corner of the attic. I thought, I'm going to get that. I'm going to pay to have that replicated because it's such a good, where all the angles meet in the
Yeah.
corner of your room. And little things like that didn't need to be done, but it gives that shot such a sort of bit of, what does it give it? Some authenticity or something. It's just not the corner of a studio.
Yeah.
It just feels a specific place, which makes it feel more real.
I remember, Mark, I shot those and I printed them on dye transfer. And the dye transfer was completely gone now. It was £1,000 a print.
Was it really?
Yeah, because they would take the transparency. I would make 3 negatives, and they would soak each negative. They would separate them with cyan, yellow, and magenta, and they would soak it in dye and pin register and roller them, peel off the film. It was really complicated, like Technicolor film.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It had a very so I used the budget on that to kind of investigate.
So you didn't really make much on it?
No, I was never.
You
really,
built the sets of that
Yeah.
must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, everything went over. I
And
was
dye
constantly-
transfers, God knows what that was.
Yeah,
But the images look amazing. Again,
Yeah.
I think it's such a good job. And even there's the trade campaign with the sort of scientists. It's such
Yeah.
a quirky little
yeah,
idea for a campaign. Oh, I think one of them's got some putty on his nose as a big nose.
yeah. Well, I remember saying to Mark, he gave me a Volkswagen print ad when he went to DDB, and I was like, "Why are you? I'm not a car photographer." And he went, "That's exactly why I'm giving you the ad." You know?
Which one was that? Which
It was a
that?
polo ad. I can't remember it now, but I'd never shot a car before, and it's a whole set of problems,
Yeah.
lighting a car, but Mark was like, no, I would never use a car photographer on a car ad.
Yeah. Yeah, don't be ridiculous.
Well, you got the mainstream agencies who just wanted the car photographers who read,
Yeah, yeah.
Auto
Yeah.
Weekly or something.
They'd always know which angle, and
Yeah,
and it they would all come out the same.
But that's what I loved about the creative aspect of working out of London. Was that it's lost a little bit now, hasn't it? That ads like your ad. I mean, I think when you did that ad for the Adidas running ad,
All right.
it was like It was like the perfect ad, wasn't it? It was the and the perfect print ad. And I was looking for the same thing. I think in photography, I was looking for the perfect advertising photograph.
Well, it's
and trying.
it's good to. I think it used to feel a little bit more like you're trying to strive for the best thing. The simplest, best.
Yes.
Like it felt like each year things moved forward a bit, and you were trying to do something that nobody had ever done that was simpler than anything any ever had done. I don't know whether it's the same or not, really. I mean, I think it's difficult when you've been in it longer to sort of get a sense of what it's like now, obviously coming into the business. But it felt like things were inching forward, just getting better each year.
Yeah.
And you were trying to just, in the hope that, I suppose it's like trying to create a hit record or something. You're just trying to think maybe the next one will be the perfect thing.
Yeah. I think that's what keeps you there.
It keeps you there. You think, well, maybe it'll be slightly simpler next time or slightly better. Or
I remember a friend of mine from college saying, "You're not shooting for nothing. You're not getting paid. You're not shooting and not getting paid, are you?" And I was like, "I haven't been paid for years." But I was working on stuff that made me feel good.
Yeah,
I really love to work.
Yeah, it's nourishing. Well, I think also I remember there was something very influential on me on that Mark Reddy shoot, which is what I saw. And I'd not heard of it before, is that Mark didn't sit there all through the shoot.
Yeah.
And what I saw is the effect on you is that you tried really hard because he wasn't there. So you were like, oh my God, he's not.
Yeah.
He's just gone, he's not here. So rather than what I might have imagined at the time, you'd think, oh, party time, I'll just chill out. And you were like, I have to really pay attention because it's down to me now.
Yeah.
It's not him sitting in the corner.
No,
it's now down to me. So it made you really think things through. So then I later used to just avoid going on shoots. A, you gain a free day, and and B, you think, well, I have to really think about how I brief someone and who I'm briefing and what I say, and then
it's been that element of being micromanaged is really difficult.
Yeah.
Like when I did working with Mark, it was amazing. He'd just stick his head around the door, everything all right, and he would go.
Yeah.
And it forces you into a good place. And when I did Volkswagen Squares, they called me up and they said, "This isn't our main ad is the cabriolet, but so just go off and do this on your own, and we'll see you later."
Well, that wasn't considered a big deal.
No, they were like, "Just shoot that. Can you shoot this?" I was like, "Yeah."
Well.
And then, boom, and I presented the cut to them, and they were like, "Okay, thank you." And they had no,
Brilliant.
but I do like working with creatives. It's really important.
Yeah.
But sometimes maybe on a shoot. Like there was one creative, very well-known creative, who used to, like try and direct the actors, and he'd say to me, "How was that?" And I'd say, "Well, it was good, but you were in front of the lens."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think if you've got that strong an opinion, you should direct it yourself.
Yeah.
You might as well get some technicians in, but you hope to sort of commission someone who can do it better than you. And then let them try and create the environment to let them do it.
Yeah, there's a sudden leap forward, from a layout, from an idea. When it goes into production, when it goes into photography, there should be kind of a huge leap. Like things should suddenly grow, come alive. It's magic.
Yeah. Well, I think it's harder now. Obviously, some of the stuff we've been talking about, you probably got drawings as layouts, and now you get mocked up things with bits of Google images and stuff. So it feels like a straitjacket. You think you're more or less doing what they've managed to comp together from 7 different pictures off the internet, rather than essentially you've got a bloke in a loft reading a letter, and you think, well, how do I make that good? Rather than, where's the tea box? What's this thing?
Great.
Shame.
Mark is great. Not ready. Was it Richard Grisdale?
Richard Grisdale was his writer at the time.
He was a Stoke fan, if I remember.
Was he?
Yeah, which is quite unheard of.
Yeah, they were great, those ads. What other stuff did you do with Mark after that?
Oh my God, I don't think I did anything with him. I can't remember, actually. I think it was just those 2 campaigns.
Was it?
Yeah.
It's funny at the same time. But you also started to do things, I think people wanted, it seemed for a period, people wanted those sort of slightly stylised, where people are all lit up, and the expressions. And so there were things like the British Gas campaign was quite an early-ish. Yeah. Well, I'm saying early, but after that. But it felt like they wanted what you were doing rather than this is an ad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They were buying into a certain set of...
Yeah, it was good fun doing that British Gas stuff, because I got this theatre designer in, who'd never done an ad before, and he would build these little models for me, and it was all, working in colour was hard. It was really an interesting, getting the colours right was difficult. There was a colour thing going on back then.
Yeah, you were very into colour at that time. So I remember your studio, I think it would be in Nassau Street, where you had like a tiny office that was the size of a loo.
Yeah,
a small downsized loo.
It was.
But what I'd noticed that every time I'd turn up, there'd be another half a dozen photography books would turn up.
Yeah.
So you were just expanding your influences. It would be, right, it's Paul Outerbridge this week.
Oh, gosh,
totally into him. And then something else and something else. And so I would pick up these things by accident.
Yeah.
Because you go, oh, he's into this bloke, that bloke.
Well, it was long before broadband, long before the internet.
Yeah, of course,
so books were...
books were the only thing
There was
you
a
could
woman that used to sell photography books, and she'd come around. She was like a sort of drug dealer.
Right.
She'd have a book. I've got observations this week. It's got a few pages missing, but I can, what do you think?
And you'd buy them all up. So you'd invest, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
It's investment.
so you could get your hands on these. You could get your hands on Avedon or Penn or Outerbridge or Bill Brandt or Diane Arbus. But obviously when broadband started, it all, God, it just changed.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Well, it's difficult. You've got the problem now is it's hard to focus. There's so much stuff out there. I don't know whether people go, it's Outerbridge this week. I'm all into him.
Yeah.
Because it's hard not to scoot here, there and everywhere, isn't it?
It's a bit like Spotify, isn't it?
Spotify, yeah. It's hard to listen to a track all the way through, isn't it?
It's dangerous in a way. My son, he has a little... he has a bunch of albums he found in the loft from the previous owners of the house, and he's got a little record player. And it's just great going back to vinyl.
Yeah. Is he into that? Is he like that?
Yeah, well, he's just got a bunch of music there,
yeah.
That he listens to. And it
focuses on.
Yeah, he's totally focused on the albums.
So what do you think would be the next big thing after that? I mean, obviously you did some lovely stuff for BBH, the Sony stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think were good. I mean, I heard you say, I just picked yellow background, which was... But you didn't overshoot them, which a lot of people would go, well, I need to really make it look like I've been really involved. But they were really good and clean, and they won loads of awards.
Yeah.
Silk Cut, potentially.
Oh, Silk Cut was great.
So would that be when Paul Arden was still there?
Paul Arden was just
so
about to go.
did you meet him? Did you have to...
Yeah, I've met Paul Arden a few times. He asked me for a print once.
Did he? Of what?
Yeah, like, I can't remember what it was now. One of my prints, he said, can I have one? And I liked him. He was quirky.
Yeah.
And I mean, I loved Arden in a way.
Yeah, he's great.
All those guys at Lowe's, I really like Lowe's. There's so many good, they've been around a long time, and there's some really...
Did you work with Alan Mouldy?
Yeah, I loved Alan Mouldy, yeah. Did a couple of things with Alan Mouldy. I'm trying to remember.
What did you do with him?
It was like Heineken or something. I did some print and posters for them.
We'll have to try and find those.
Yeah,
put them in.
Mouldy was great. They were all brilliant. Those, I said, like working with good creatives.
Yeah,
it's amazing. You learn. You learn so much.
So what did you do on Silk Cut? Obviously Messerschmitt. What was the first one that you did?
I only did one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I just did one, and
the Messerschmitt one.
Yeah, right. But in this rental darkroom I used to go to, and they only used to let me go at night. When the proper photographers would come by day, or printers.
Right.
There was an old photographer there with shocking white hair, and I thought, well, I'll do a Silk Cut ad. I put him in a white shirt with a purple tie, and I'll put a cut in it. And I remember taking that into them, and they were like, "Oh God, this is awful."
Oh, really?
But they went, "Yeah, what about this?" And I was like,
so that was like a perfect timing thing. That
so I went off and shot it. It just worked out really well. It was just so much fun to do.
So it's interesting to me that a lot of these things are you self-generated.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You've put yourself out there. You've not sort of waited for things to happen. So you're shooting stuff for me, for nothing, because obviously we're friends, but you're shooting stuff for Mark at Simon's Palmer for nothing. You've created a Silk Cut. You obviously wanted to do a Silk Cut ad. So you've created your own one, and although they didn't like it, it's serendipitously, they've gone, well, maybe you could shoot this.
Yeah.
But you seem like you made your own luck.
Yeah, I think, look, if you're going to commit, it's like, you've got to commit so it hurts.
Yeah.
And then people start rewarding you, they want your passion, they want, as I said, they want to go from a layout to a photograph. They want it to be a huge leap, and it's capturing the energy and the, injecting it with energy. I think if you don't if you're not energetic in your mind and soul, then
Yeah. So you're presenting yourself like that to various people who are then picking up on that.
Yeah. I mean, some agencies just wanted things shot really straightforwardly. They didn't want any intensity.
Yeah.
They just want things done neatly and quietly. And I didn't really work with those sort of people. I like visceral images, but I also like wit and charm. I like visual wit.
Yeah.
I like sort of visually driven things with ideas in it.
Well, it seems like you get a lot of that going through all the work.
Right.
A lot of it, particularly in the film as well.
Yeah.
There's like a visual idea in a lot of the films.
I was looking today at that Mugshots film we did together,
Yeah.
and I was like, God, it was such a neat idea, wasn't it? Because your original idea was to get Ridley Scott and Brian Griffin and all these big directors to shoot.
Coming off the back of the O'Connor Dowd, let's get all the...
Get an egg, right?
Right.
And have them interpret an egg.
Oh, God, was it really? I don't remember that.
And it was like, we can't really afford to get Tony Kaye. It's going to cost a fortune.
What, we were going to mimic their style or to actually get
we were
them?
going to ask them to, see if they'd just shoot, and have like all these different directors in one commercial. And then it was a bit like, in the style of, and then eventually it was just one egg cup.
The budget got cut
do you remember
£100? I don't remember that.
We got Harry Enfield, right?
Well, I remember that was... I think we wanted Peter Cook and Dudley Moore to do the voiceover. We thought, well, they could be like Derek and Clive riffing off the thing of... I think there were 2 casting agents or something, wasn't there? And we couldn't get Dudley Moore. And Peter Cook said, I'll only do it if Harry Enfield does it.
I remember it was Harry Enfield saying, I'll only do it with Peter Cook. And I actually ran into him and mentioned it to him, and he was like...
Harry Enfield?
He just died a couple of weeks after that. Peter Cook did.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Was that...
And listening to today, you can hear something in his voice. Something...
Well, my memory is that we wanted Harry Enfield, and he said he will only do it with Peter Cook. Maybe that way round.
Jackie at Mugshots said, I can get Harry Enfield to do this.
Oh, right.
And I was like, oh my God, I love Harry Enfield.
And he said he'd only do it with Peter Cook.
Yeah. And remember they came in and he said, well, they did the voiceover. And he said, we have an embarrassment of riches. And I was like, yes. And it was Paul Watts who edited it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Ivan Bird,
yeah.
The camera's funny.
But it won a bronze at Cannes, right?
Yeah.
It was a cracking...
Well, it's funny, because I can remember when we did the recording, hoping they'd improvise, Peter Cook we thought, God, he's going to be amazing, Peter Cook, because he's amazing. He was like hungover and didn't say much, and Harry Enfield was just
he was just
amazing,
fiery,
one after the other. He was just absolutely brilliant. In fact, I can't remember whether
he just said, "You're just a
fucking egg." Oh, was it? You're just a fucking onion. Was that Harry Enfield?
Yeah.
But I just remember him being just amazing.
It was
coming up with endless stuff.
Yeah, he was just on.
Peter Cook was just laughing. He wasn't really involved.
Yeah. Well, he was close
a bit
to the
drunk.
end.
Yeah,
really in a sorry state.
But yeah, I mean that would be another one of our £100 budget type things.
Shot in my studio. It was,
probably cost more to enter in Cannes than it costs to make.
Right. Right.
But yeah, funny little thing. Oh, I didn't remember how it started.
Yeah, it was such a worthwhile experience, though. Because it distilled it down to a really simple idea.
Changing the
Just can you imagine what it would have been? It would have been disastrous.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it would have been. Trying to mimic. I mean, what a ridiculous thing! Trying to mimic all the most expensive directors in London. But before that, and I can remember this happening, which was really weird. So I'd love to know what year it was, but I remember you, just as you were getting going in photography, hadn't done much.
Yeah.
Said, "Oh, this Dutch agency want me to shoot a commercial."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that's nuts. You've barely done any stills. Why do they want that?
Well,
and also, it wasn't like a simple one like my tabletop one. It was a boxing thing.
Yeah.
So, do you remember when that was? Because you hadn't done much at the time. You'd done no film.
Yeah, I'd just slightly started to tire of working on some print stuff because it became a bit... we have someone standing by a car, It was just got a bit, So I just got... I love film, obviously, and doing this print stuff for them, really strong print ads for Audi, Saatchi's in Amsterdam, and they're really good guys. And they said to me, "How do you fancy directing?" I did this thing with a boxer. How do you fancy doing a commercial about this boxer? And I went, great. And they said, well, who's your production company? And I went, well, and I was trying to make it up, and they said, you don't have one, do you? And I said, don't worry, we'll set you up with Jenny and Co. Which was
They said?
Yeah. They knew this woman at Jenny and Co. called Karen Cunningham, who her husband worked at Saatchi's in Amsterdam. And they set me up, these two guys, Peter Van Velsen and Wim Ubaks. And it did really well for me.
It's unbelievable that they would do that because you didn't have a reel, you'd not shot any film.
You know, they were. It was interesting that I think they realised the director they were normally using was sick. What was his name now? Pete. Anyway,
there's so many others out there.
Yeah, they were just really good guys. You know, I think they saw the opportunity to do something. I don't know why or how, but I really loved working with them.
But you did it well. Obviously, it was based on Raging Bull.
Yeah.
But it seems so strange to me because weren't really that established in stills. I can't remember the dates now, but it seemed very early to me.
It was 92. It was July 92.
Was it 92?
It was 92, yeah.
So, yeah, you were assisting 2 years before.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, yeah. But I love boxing, and my friend from school was the guy, he was a light heavyweight amateur, and I used to follow him around. And we ended up, he was one of the artists that lent me his drawings to get into art school. Right. And he was really into boxing. And he's had about 11 or 12 fights and ended up deciding to be a painter. And I used him in the ad, you know. But I remember, he had this hairy chest. And I was
he was the boxer, was he?
He was the boxer. And I was like, I can't really ask him to shave his chest. Right now, I'd be like, get rid of all that.
Yeah.
You know? And it was one of those things, I was a bit nervous, you know.
Yeah.
There's something about
naked woman again all over. I'll ask him at the end of the day.
But it was that's what's so great about this business. It's been you get to confront all your demons in a way, or get over your inhibitions because you have to. You know. But yeah, that was a great experience because putting together a commercial is really interesting. You know, because you've got all these components.
Yeah.
You know, and my dad was a toolmaker. I was a toolmaker. I didn't do my whole apprenticeship. My granddad was. And toolmaking is all about taking different parts and making them fit together. And it's full of maths and trigonometry. It's painfully difficult. But somehow or another, it related to making a commercial. You know, you're putting bits and pieces together.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there was an interesting, I really was passionate. And I still am about that side of the business.
Well, I remember you, to me, you would almost be more passionate about film. So there's loads of people that I learnt about through you that I still like Preston Sturgis, Powell and Pressburger, all those people that you go, oh my God, you've got to see this film, it's amazing. All these old films. I don't know, where you didn't do that at college, did you?
I did. It was mainly photography I did.
Right,
but I tagged onto film a little bit. But
it still seemed so strange that someone you've never shot anything like that before. And it was rowdy. It wasn't like me going, "Oh, do you want to do this egg thing for £100?"
It was a bit like Mark Reddy, you know. It was like, well, I'll never use a car photographer to do a car ad. You know, they were like, might as well let's use this guy who's never done a thing, but we think they'll just roll the dice on it. You know, and that's something that's it was quite hard in to convince English agencies to go with a director who'd never done anything.
Maybe if that had done that, it would have been tougher to get into that in England.
There was a good scene in Holland at the time. There was a good Dutch. Do you remember? Is it Peter? Who's it? Who's that director? The Mayor. What's his name? A really good Dutch director from the early 90s. There was a good, strong agency scene there.
Yeah.
You know, so they would take risks, I think, which is, you know, they're very, very nervous here. Remember, the heads of TVs were sort of very cautious, you know.
Yeah, it'd be really tough. The equivalent. I mean, that would have been at BBH. There's no way. I wouldn't have thought they would give a photographer who's never directed anything an Audi commercial. Yeah. So I can remember this thing that was a big influence on me and Mark, and we talked about this. So if I had to guess, I'd say you're 4 years in.
Yeah.
Right. And you said, I'm going to give a talk. And you think, are you joking? What do you mean you're going to give a talk? That's not what people like us do, is it? Yeah, I'm going to. I think you hired somewhere in Smithfield.
It was the Association of Photographers invited me to give a talk.
Was it?
Yeah.
I remember it was at the top of a building somewhere.
Yeah.
And so at the time you think, I thought, God, how do you do it? That feels like that's the sort of thing John Hegarty does. And those grown-ups do, not us. That seems so weird. So I came, Mark came.
Well, you did a print ad for it, didn't you? You did a poster for it.
Was it? I think it was before that.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it's before that. It was very early on, and I remember it being at the top of it. It would be like 50 people.
Oh, really?
It was at the top of the building. I thought it was in Smithfield, but it could have
was
been anywhere.
probably Holmes Studios, I think.
All right.
Is it?
And so I was slightly anxious because I was thinking, how's this? I mean, you've never given a talk that I'm aware. You're supposed to be all grown up and erudite to start talking about stuff. And what was amazing and influential to me and Mark, who both said the same thing, is that you were exactly the same when you gave a talk to you were before you, 10 minutes before you gave the talk. You weren't all talky, you were all formal. Right. You were like, there's this thing, I did this, hang on, go back one to the first one. What I wanted to say about that, not in a bad way, just in a normal...
Yeah.
You think, I didn't know you could do talks just being yourself. I thought you had to be all formal.
Yeah.
So you were completely 100% comfortable and not trying to be remember anything, or you were just like, I'm here, I'll tell you about this stuff.
Yeah.
There's that. Go back a bit, doesn't matter. Right, that one there. And you think, oh, all right, so you can do talks where you're just yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've only seen talks where they have it all prepared and it's all formal.
Yeah.
And Mark said the same thing. That he thought, well, I could do a talk being me. I couldn't do a talk being someone else, but being me, I've got a chance.
Yeah, that's the great thing about it.
Do you remember doing that talk or not?
I don't remember that one. I think I did a few. I think the Association of Photographers asked me to talk. So I started to win a few awards of those guys, in their annuals. And I think they just, out of anyone who sort of...
them, yeah. I think, I'm trying to think that poster.
That poster was great.
That me and Derek did.
Yeah, you flipped me, didn't you? Remember?
Did we?
In the picture of me, I'm flipped.
Is the wrong way around?
Yeah.
You look at it and think, God, that seems so weird. Well, I've got the roughs from the rip-off idea I did before Derek said no. So do you remember what that was?
No.
So we did a shoot with you, that my original idea, complete rip-off, but I just loved the original so much that I tried to turn a blind eye, which was, it seemed like the perfect thing. So the brief is you giving a talk, you're a photographer. So it's you mid-expression and you've got two massive red quotation marks either side of you.
Yeah.
So I've got a bunch of prints that we did, shot of you. I've got a feeling Patricia may have shot it.
She did shoot it, yeah.
And I'm scribbling on those as roughs. And then I showed Derek and he went, well, that's just that nick on it. I was like, yeah, but it's perfect for this, isn't it? Seems a shame to... And he went, well, it's just that nick on it. And so he said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And then before you know it, knowing Derek, there's a napkin full of ideas.
Oh, my God.
Alternatives. And one of them is a photograph of you pinned to the back wall and a microphone in front, which we ended up shooting, which was better and not a rip-off.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah, it was great. I really like that. Again, simple idea, isn't it?
Yeah, just a dead simple thing.
Did I tell you I worked with, was it Barbara? What was her name? She used to work at BBH.
Barbara Noakes.
She went to New York and she came back, she was at Gray's, and I was doing this, and she went, Gray in New York, their motto is, the further you get away from a good idea, the more money you make.
Probably true. God.
I was like, oh no.
So, funnily enough, we're at Wave at the moment, and Parv sent me the commercial you shot with Tom and Walt for no reason at all. He just said, I'm talking to Malcolm tomorrow. And I was surprised at how still powerful and amazing it seemed. Because it seems, I can't imagine what the script was. I've got no idea what the script could have been. But it feels so liquid and unusual. And obviously the music and editing is amazing. It's just such a mesmerising, funny thing. I don't know what the start point was. And I can't imagine it happening today.
I mean, Tom and Walter were such a strange couple of men. They were so focused and so willing to break rules. I mean, that Kiss FM was so much about them. When I'd shot it, I knew that music is life is was the idea, and I knew that, and I knew that music for them was coming out of things in life. Like you open a window, music would come in, or turn a fan on, and music would start, or a guy would hit a hammer, or what they wanted was just a celebration, I think, of movement and noise and music. And when I shot it, I couldn't cut it. The editor we were cutting with couldn't cut it. He didn't. He couldn't. He just couldn't make an edit.
What was the start point? Show different things, making different noises that could be music.
It was like, let's find. It was really strange and interesting because I was in the very beginning of the process with them. So they said, "Music is life. We're going to make this film celebrating that," and it just become legal. Kiss FM, and they wanted a very graphic, sensory observation of music coming out of things. So we decided a fan would be good. We decided somebody dancing would be good. Somebody somebody dancing in water and the water splashing would. It was really abstract.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a normal.
And what was that, storyboarded, written up?
It was all written up and then slightly sketched out. And then what happened was that when we made it, we were running out of money. And Tom and Walt put in like $5,000 of their own pocket.
Really?
And what happened was that David Abbott found out, and it started to pick up a few awards, and he obviously...
He found out they put money in their own
so
pocket?
he gave them both a car, like a company car,
Did
he was like, you can't be spending your own money.
Did he really? Wow.
And we shot it, and it was... I'll give you an example. They wanted a heart beating in someone's chest.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I was like, well, we could get a pig's heart. And they were like, no, it has to be a real heart. So I phoned up Papworth Hospital. I said, can we film a heart operation for a commercial? They went, yeah, come up. Well, So I got up to Papworth, and they said, well, you can film through this window, and you pay a donation. And I went, no, the camera has to be right above the chest. And they said, absolutely no way. And I was holding the script, and this guy walks by, a very tall man. He looked over and he said, what's that? And I said, it's a script for a commercial. And he said, music is life. And he said, can I look at this? And he was looking at it. Come into my office. And he was the chief surgeon of Papworth. And he went, what you need is a good-looking heart. How many days do you need? I said, just 2 days' notice. Literally calls us next week. I've got a woman coming in who I'm replacing a valve, but she hasn't had any operation, so there'll be no scar tissue. It'll be a perfect heart.
Oh, my God.
So we go up there with a dolly, camera, cinematographer, focus puller, and we literally go up there and we just roll into the surgery, and they sterilise us. And as we're going into the operating theatre, the woman was on the table, right? And they said, who are you? And I said, we're with so-and-so. So they start to open her up. And he still hasn't arrived. And then as they're opening her up, he walks in. Oh, gentlemen, hello. Bring the camera in. We bring the camera in. We bring the light in. And he said, let's stop the heart, shall we? And so anyway, as soon as we got the shot, he said, no, I want you to stay and film the whole thing, And he put the valve in, and we were talking. He was really into film.
Yeah.
So we got that shot, and we put it into the film.
Which is a great shot, isn't it?
And it was a lesson for me. It was all about, because, production companies and people, they don't want you to go and do this. It's just too much to have to go into a hospital.
Yeah.
But with Tom and Walt, they were like, they wouldn't say no. I mean, you ever hear that story that they got Francis Bacon in to do a print ad?
No. Well, it was was that for the posters for anti-fur trade or something?
He died before he could do them.
Oh, you're joking.
But
he was going to do it?
He came into BBDO to see them. Like they walked up to him in the street and said, we want you to do some ads. So Francis Bacon.
Do it. That's unbelievable.
And then they were really they were just breaking all these.
They massively changed the business.
Yeah.
And it's particularly then that it was a sort of defiant, can do, anything's possible.
100%. That's exactly it. It was a bit like in the Revolution, in Russia in 1917, the October Revolution. They were like, you can't take photographs from eye level anymore because that's bourgeois.
Right.
You have to do it from a different angle. You have to see the world differently. And then Stalin came in and then executed everyone. But what they reminded me of that. They were like, you just can't do it from eye level. You had to break that cycle.
Interesting.
And they were really good for that kind of thing. They were. So when we were cutting, I suddenly learned from them the power of editing.
Oh, the editing's amazing on that. Who was the editor on that?
I can't remember. I'll have to look him up. He wasn't interested in it, really.
I know I think you're heavily involved in that area.
But I did there was a director called Mehdi Nerosian at Red Wing, and he didn't have time to do this ad, and it was for Moosehead, and it was for a Swedish agency, and they had no script. Can you write the script?
They said to you?
Yeah, can you write the script? So Tom Walt helped me. Then it was really interesting, you know, and basically just gave them the film, and they were like, "Great, thanks," you know, and it was really interesting working with them. And you know, they wanted to make images, and they wanted to tell stories. There was no preconditions.
No, I think it's. I was telling Parv this sort of. It's really hard to explain now how they influenced the business with this sort of can-do vibe. And made stuff happen out of nothing, out of thin air, could make things happen. So I used to be on the D&AD committee with Tom, and what would happen is the committee would turn up once a month for a couple of hours one morning. A bunch of creators would turn up, and the D&AD people would run through an agenda. You know, who's the next, I can't remember what the issues were, who's the next president, this thing, that thing, awards night. And of course, you kind of realise after a while that they don't really, the creatives to them get in the way. They're perfectly happy running it and doing their own thing. And then all of a sudden there's a bunch of mouthy people with different views on what the book should be, or should we divide you know, I remember saying, it used to be there'd be one page and it would just be one commercial, and then they said, we could get two on a page, you know, if we have less frames. You think, well, we should not do things like that because the book is everything. Anyway, so let's say if that was me, I would say, I don't think we should do that. I think, you know, you've got no chance of understanding what that is, and it should feel more generous and blah, blah, blah. And someone would say, yep, make a note of that on the agenda and we'll address that in the next thing because we've got a lot to get through. And you think, okay, fair enough. And then, of course, a month later, they don't bring it up. You've moved on. There's some other issue. You've forgotten about it. So these things are never addressed. If Tom would do something like that, he'd say, I don't think we should split the page in two. I think it's wrong. And they'd go, okay, make a note of that, put that on the agenda, we'll do that next month, and we address that. And he'd go, I want to address that now. And they'd go, well, we can't now because there's a real, you know, we've got a lot of issues to cover and we just haven't got time, which is a real pain. But and he'd go, I'm going to stand on the table now until we've addressed this issue. And he'd get up and stand on the table, on the boardroom table. And there'd be all these posh people around looking at each other, not knowing what to do because he's standing on the table. And obviously they'd have to fold. They'd go, okay, let's address that now. so it would get done.
Yeah.
And that's how they approached things. It was like they weren't going to be fobbed off by anyone on any of the subjects. Yeah. So stuff would happen, even little things like that, whatever the issue was. Yeah,
there's a real lesson in working with those guys. You know, they broke. I mean, in the edit, there was this convention of beginning, middle, and end. You know, in an edit. Yeah. You know, it would start at the beginning and you'd cut the middle, and was it John Luke Goddard? A film needs a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. Yeah. And that's Tom and Walt. Yeah. It was not necessarily have to be in any order. You know, it was all about breaking that. It was basically you were moving into a different era of storytelling with those guys. For me, yeah, you know, they bust everything apart. There was a radicalism to them, in a way.
So what did you take away from that? It sounds like you took away a lot from that experience of working with them.
Yeah, I think
positivism or that.
Yeah, it was. What was interesting was when they read the ad. It never ran with the same track. Yeah,
Johnny mentioned that earlier. Every single time it ran, he said it was 72 times.
Yeah. No,
it would be a different mix.
I mean, they used the infrastructure of the agency to make that happen. And they knew they were going to win awards. You know, so...
How did they use the infrastructure of the agency?
They would say to the agency, go off and do 72 different mixes. And the agency, it was so big and so vast, but they were supporting them.
They could make it happen.
Yeah, there was a really... They were like the Eric Cantona of creatives.
Yeah. That's true.
They were like flipping the bird in a way, but also loving. They wanted to win awards. They were like you and in the same way, and Mark and Chris. You know, they wanted to getting into the book was everything to them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I remember once I was asked to give a talk at a college to some students, and they asked you to make a film. It was a bit of a pain. So I did this film. And then I showed it to the students, and they made this film. And there's a blind man who plays a violin outside of.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah, do you remember
that film? Yeah,
and they give him a bunch of cash,
yeah.
and he's feeling the cash. And they said, if you're going to give till it hurts. And it was a John Lennon song. I can't remember which song it was now. And I was like, it was so powerful, so compelling. They had that, they had some really interesting ideas.
Also, the track on it is Prince.
Yeah,
Who doesn't let his music
yeah.
be on ads?
They
How did that happen?
I think they used Kiss FM, I think, to lobby for that, to get Prince's people, just to sign it off.
But again, that's another incredible example that Prince doesn't let his. I think the only people I know don't. There must be others. Is Jackson Browne and Prince. Just is a blanket no on ads.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the reasons I know that that's the case, which is linked to you, is when you phoned me and said, you know that album you got me, the Nick Drake album?
Yeah.
Pink Moon. I've just suggested it to the people at Volkswagen because Prince has pulled out under a cherry red moon. He's pulled out because he doesn't do ads.
Yeah.
He said, I think they're going to use that. And they did, obviously. It made a massive thing. But there's a sort of weird example that he doesn't do ads.
Yeah, that creative, what's his name, Lance, I forget his name now, he loved Nick Drake.
But he'd never heard of him,
Never.
Really. Yeah.
Well, he hadn't sort of crossed the ocean then, had he, Nick Drake?
No, he was very
I remember you introduced me to him.
Yeah, I used to buy everyone Nick Drake albums before
What was
he
the
wasn't
musician
known.
you like, the Scottish guy, what was that?
John Martin.
John Martin.
Yeah. Your son's probably got those albums.
He
now
has, yeah.
He's
I
probably
love
sitting
Nick Drake.
on or whatever.
He's global now, Nick Drake.
Yeah,
No.
he's mad. I mean, that's on Wikipedia. That's the moment where he goes from being massively known
Wow.
because he was on an ad. Oh. He sold something like 4,000 albums in his lifetime, which is just a crime because they sound amazing still.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's interesting going through your commercials. The thing that seems to unite them is they're very simple and visual. They're simple visual ideas. So I don't know whether that's you turning the scripts into simple visual ideas, or if someone's got a simple visual idea, they come to you. Or both.
It's become a little bit like that. I think I remember my wife saying to me, "Can't you move the camera more, like so and so? Look at that guy in this."
Yeah, there's a lot where it's static, but
good.
good.
Yeah, if you look at Hitchcock, it's obviously a really good template for he moves the camera all the time, but it's also about thoughtful frames. Obviously silent film. Like coming with Deaf Parents, looking at Chaplin or Keaton. All again, a lot of static frames. Ozu, Japanese filmmaker I love. Never move the camera. Never go dirty over. Always clean, simple, uncluttered. That was my thing. And I think it still is, and the work I'm doing now, it's all about arranging, taking things out of a frame.
Yeah. Do you think that's unusual now?
I think so. I'm not really sure.
It felt like it, reminding myself of you going through your stuff again. It felt.
You remember that ad you sent me? It was that Trinitron ad that John Webster did.
Oh, yeah.
Who directed that?
In fact, that's could have been Roger Woodburn.
Oh, yeah.
The sofa. I love that ad.
Yeah. It's really,
that feels like you could have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that ad a lot. Again, it's that Bill Bernbach thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just, it was a stage. It wasn't even a room, was it?
No, nothing.
It was such a clean, simple idea. Those kind of things inspire me, I think I found a niche for those quirky, odd, observed moments, and I began to kind of exploit that.
I suppose, obviously, the Volkswagen Squares helped because it was so simple.
Yeah.
And that was a sort of similar thing observed. So that was barely a script then, by the sound of it. It was just something you went off and...
It was just like, they would just send me some pictures of like Squares things and the Beetle. And they were like, I'd done a few ads for them. The two creative directors there were great. They were a bit like the Dutch guys. They were like...
Yeah.
They like English directors, I think. I've done a few things with them, but they went off to do this cabaret thing with a superstar Hollywood director. It was it was all glitzy, and ELO did the music. And my thing, it was like not much money.
Whatever was left down the sofa.
But there was a good idea there. But it was a very free creative process, and it did really well for them. I remember the producer, the creatives won. It's an award where you can win cash.
Oh, that's some of the American ones. You win hard cash.
Yeah, and they create.
Quite a lot, I think.
I ran into the producer, and he said to me, "Those motherfuckers, they took all the cash." You know,
Oh, really?
And I said, "Well, it was their idea."
Yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't considered that you might get some of that cash either.
But
Yeah, it's odd. In the States, there are some of those awards. They give them like 25 grand or something.
There was 50K. These two
was
guys
it?
got, yeah. But that's what good ideas mean. I think winning ads really can move an agency along quickly.
Yeah. Well, you started to do a lot. I think I sort of reminded myself of Coco de Mer,
Yeah,
which was
yeah,
lovely.
Yeah,
It's
really
just a simple little
Yeah.
thing with a twist at the end.
I think with Volkswagen Square, it's a bit like your print ad. It was like, oh my god, I've just suddenly hit this thing. It couldn't be any better.
Yeah.
It just couldn't be any better. It was like it just couldn't be any better. It was so breathtakingly simple. I remember on the shoot, this one of the prop guys came up with a set of bathroom scales, and they were round, and I was like, no, squares. And I wish every idea could be that simple.
Yeah.
But and again, cutting it. I'd learned from Tom Walter. I knew that the edit had to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
It had to be. Everything was it's an arc, isn't it? It's a narrative, your own personal narrative arc, isn't it?
That's interesting. So trying to get the narrative in that set of squares.
Yeah.
So what were what were the things that would break that or help that?
Well, I think, because it's such a static idea, that like certain moments
can be predictable if you're not careful.
Yeah. So you become a repetitive cycle. So you need a bit of movement, or you need a little bit of charm, a little bit of wit to keep you on your
interest.
To keep the interest up. And then you needed to escalate the music, and you need to escalate the cut, and you need to build, and it would build in feeling, and so it always had to be moving and expanding.
Yeah.
It's like, in a way, it's like the shape of music, like a musical composition.
Yeah.
Like if you take the bolero, for example, like it just escalates, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that form is really interesting to me.
That's interesting. And then I didn't realise you'd done quite so many Nike ads.
Yeah,
Which you've done an enormous amount of those over the years.
Well, I think my favourite.
That's a very different thing. What's your favourite?
My favourite one is the Tiger Woods one. I did,
right?
Where because I remember saying to them like, let's not shoot Tiger Woods on a golf course. And they were like, what, sorry?
Yeah.
I know, let's put him in the studio, because it's all about his swing.
Yeah.
Nothing else, just the swing.
Yeah.
Like almost an anatomical.
Simplifying it down again.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. That it wasn't perfect. It's not perfect technically, but it's still. I really enjoyed that side of it, rather than running around shooting various, sports people. Which it can be.
So
really
do you think
stressful.
you would, with some of those, you would try and control the circumstance? Because obviously, sports people are notoriously difficult and flaky to work with.
Yeah.
They don't turn up, or they turn up give you 20 minutes. Do you think you would try and control what you're doing to suit you?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Like the Tiger Woods one.
Oh,
is a good example.
It's all about controlling the elements. I think the best experience I ever had was working with Zlatan Ibrahimovic on a Nike ad.
What's he like?
He was unbelievable. Because
in a good way or in a
in a
terrible
really
way?
good way. And I was doing a tracking shot of him running with the ball, and I was like, I could hear his legs creaking, and I thought he was going to injure himself. And I realised he was just so committed to the shot.
Oh, really?
That I was like, I could hear his sinews, and it was just. And then at the end of the shoot, I said, "That's it, you're done." And he said, "Well, can I stay? Because I'm really into film." And he came back with his tracksuit on and a cup of coffee and put his feet up. And he said, "I really like, like shooting film and directing." And he said, "Do you like this movie, Let the Right One In?" And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "That's my favourite film."
Which one's that? I don't know.
It's a Swedish vampire movie. You have to see it. It's stunning.
Wow.
I mean, it's remarkable. And I remember I couldn't get rid of him.
Amazing. I wouldn't have thought he'd be like that. His personality doesn't appear like that, does it? He presents himself as much more arrogant and cold, I think.
But... And he's just a really beautiful guy. And then I got on the plane the next day to go from Milan to Munich to do Frank Ribery. And he was on the plane with the entire Inter Milan team. And he was like, and he introduced me to the whole team, and the whole team were like bored shitless. Mourinho was the manager. Right. And they were like,
Who gives a shit?
And he went, "I'll come to the shoot." I said, "Well, we're shooting Frank." And he said, "Oh, I'll come too." And I went, "No, honestly, you're too busy. I don't have to talk him out of it."
So we have to shake him off. So is he the best
you've
shot
best
athlete in terms of nicest, most accommodating?
I liked Kobe Bryant.
Right.
He was a smart guy. You know,
Was he?
Really, because he grew up in Italy and he knew football, and we had a really good chat. But he was brilliant to work with, absolutely brilliant. I mean,
in the same way that he was very, very committed.
Very committed. Yeah, you know, you just have to be careful working with these sports people. That you don't ask them to do stuff they can't do. You ask them stuff they can't do
because they feel humiliated.
Yeah, they'll you know, it's like asking Ronaldo to recite a poem. You know, so he's not going to want to do that. You know,
that's interesting. Because I used to think when with certain photographers, and particularly you, a lot of the skill is in how you talk, not particularly to do with the camera, but is in how you engage with a person.
Right.
So I remember this thing you telling me that I think it was Richard Avedon was trick was to, when he was doing celebrities, would line it all up, light it or not light it if it was daylight, chat away with them and then say something like, "What scares you?" I think it was that. What scares you, or what are you afraid of? And then all of a sudden, their fake expression would drop. Yeah. And then he would take the picture.
Oh, he was brilliant that way, wasn't he? He was incredible, Avedon, wasn't he?
And I think that sort of trying to make people comfortable and get something out of them. He's obviously as important as the technical bit.
Well, it's a really interesting relationship between the photographer and the sitter. It's a very personal, strange relationship. You know, it's really complicated. It can be really complicated. But again, it's been great therapy for me because it allowed me to overcome a lot of my shyness. You know, growing from the world of deaf people. Deaf people are like my profoundly shy people.
It's funny because you seem, going back to my example of you giving your talk, didn't appear like that.
Right.
At all.
Right. It's interesting. I think what I took from having my deaf parents was a massive amount of inspiration. Because in a way they enabled me, you know, by their disability, you know, whereas, you know, there's a lot of shame, you know, in disability. You know, a lot of people I know who had deaf parents were incredibly embarrassed about them, you know.
Were they?
Yeah, you know, just because the way they sounded and the way they couldn't follow things.
So did you feel responsibility to communicate more, talk more, or engage more because you could?
Yeah, I think it was really nice to, you know, I mean, I learned to. I actually made a short film about my parents for Channel 4 and BBC, how they met, a little drama about them, you know. And I took what I celebrated. It was like, like, you know, it was like, if you want to be a photographer, it's all about looking.
Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting. There's a story of someone told me that I think it was David Bailey having lunch with Frank Lowe. I don't know who told me this. I can't imagine he would have told me this. And supposedly, when they'd sat down, I think Frank Lowe might have been talking about being an artist or writing something. And he said, "What's behind you, Frank?" And he went, "What do you mean?" He went, "Tell me what's behind you now." He said, "Oh, I have no idea." He said, "You've got to observe what's happening. If you ask me what's behind me, I'll tell you. Because I've taken in the room. I know who's here, where everything is. You know, just being constantly alive to where you are and what's happening. Because most people are kind of sleepwalking, aren't they?
It's weird you actually mentioned this photograph I took. You said it was of a relative, and it was of a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine's uncle who'd never worked in a day in his life. Yeah. He was an odd guy. And I took this picture of him, and he said, "Can you drop the camera?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Can you drop the camera?" And what he meant was, what I think he meant was, "Can you see?" You know, the camera's just a device for looking. You know, the camera. Can you drop the camera and can you just see? Can you look? You know,
what he was saying. Could you just look at the moment to take in what's there? Or
well, you covet the camera, like you covet the equipment. It's like asking
interesting
Hemingway what kind of typewriter he uses. You know, it's not interesting.
Which is irrelevant.
It's totally irrelevant.
God, that's interesting. It's a highbrow question for
what's that?
It's a highbrow question for someone who's never.
Well, he had this. He used to draw maps of America and invent all the towns and cities and roads that connected them. And I looked at them. Right. He was odd.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how did you go from doing these commercials into film? Because I think the next, if we're going to link, the next bit for me is because obviously, as a graph, as time goes on, our meetings are less and less. And the next one, probably 5 years later, is you said, "I've just shot a feature film. Can you do some posters?" So how did you go from doing commercials to features?
Well, I did Kiss FM. I remember Red Wing went down. I joined Tom Vaughan and Anthea, if you remember those guys.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, will you join our production company?" And I shot Kiss FM with them. And
The ad we were talking about.
yeah, and they produced, their company produced it. But at that time, they were making a deal with Propaganda Films out of America, and there was a guy there called Steve Golin who said to me, "Hey, Mal, are you really into photography?" But he said, "Like, why don't you come over and work at Propaganda," which I did do. And actually, what happened was that I kept on shooting on. I shot too much film on Kiss FM, and Vaughan and Anthony decided to fire me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they called me and they said, "We're firing you." I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Because you think you're number one round here." And I said, "Well, doesn't every director think they're number one?"
Yeah, that's a good
and they
thing.
said, "That might be the case, but you're still fired."
Oh, really? God, how bizarre.
So I opened up my own little production company because I had a studio. And then I started working out of Propaganda Films, and Steve became a really good friend. And Steve was a kingmaker in a way. He established the careers of like Dom Senna, David Fincher, Mark Romanek, Spike Jonze, all come out of Propaganda. And he'd started a new company called Anonymous Content, and he'd sent me the scripts. He said, "Oh, you might like this," and he'd helped me write a few projects we've been involved in. I started doing a lot of commercials through his company, and he sent me the script for 44-inch chest. And my agent at the time represented Ray Winston, and there's a few other directors vying for this script, and my agent kindly blocked all those guys getting to Ray. Ray was attached.
Right.
And I had this, he set me up with
So
Ray.
he found the script first, Ray Winston?
Yeah, well, Ray Winston had done Sexy Beast with John Glazer, and then the writers who'd written that had written 44-inch chest, and somehow Steve Golin had the rights, but 3 or 4 directors were bidding on it, and somehow my agent got me together with Ray, and Ray and I got on like a house on fire, and Ray was like, "Malcolm's the man." So that's quick. That's how we got that made.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun making it.
Yeah. It's funny you say it's a lot of fun making it, because I think of you as a sort of happy guy.
Yeah.
As you can hear when you're talking on this now.
Yeah.
And so you called me and said, "Look, the studio are not sure how to promote the film because they think it's a bit unusual.
Yeah.
Can you have a go at some posters?" So I said, "Yeah." So you set me up with a screening, which I went down. It was just me and Steve Barron.
Oh, really?
In there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it wasn't. I was thinking, God, this is so. It's full of the C word.
Yeah.
It seems so unlike you.
Yeah.
It was like quite down and.
Yeah.
And I could see why they had a. So obviously, I did some ads, which I don't know whether you were offended by, that sort of took that vibe and said, made fun of it.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, what else can you?
Yeah.
It's one location.
Yeah.
There's lots of people getting angry with each other and swearing and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
did something based on that, which I don't think they liked, or you didn't like. Someone didn't like them, but it seems such an unusual choice. For you. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like, I think if anyone's still with us 2 hours in, they can tell that you're not a sort of downbeat, morose.
Well, there's that great movie by Preston Sturges called Sullivan's Travels.
Yeah, remember? Totally. Yeah.
And he wants to make he's a comedy director who wants to make a
grim, gritty.
which is called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did
but
that,
at the end of the day, he realises that comedy is the way forward. And I have that, wish in a way. Wouldn't it be great
to make something more serious?
Or no, less serious. Make something,
less serious,
make a comedy.
Yeah.
But 44-inch chess was it was an investigation, a very, very, very powerful. I remember John Hurt's wife said, "Thank God," on the day we finished. She went, "Thank God this is over."
Did she?
She went, "He's just horrible to me. He comes home from work, he swears at me."
Oh, really?
he's just awful.
I mean, you look at the list of actors and you think, what a nightmare to be in charge of all that lot in the same...
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen Burkoff.
Yeah, he was tricky.
Ray Winston.
Razor.
John Hurt. I mean, just endless famous but strong-willed people.
McShane was tricky.
McShane?
I love McShane. I mean, he's unbelievable, but you have to handle him really carefully. I mean, he's really a fabulous actor. I mean, he's so great. And but you have to...
But I can't imagine them all circulating in the same room.
They were sort of feasting on me a little bit, like first-time director,
Right.
you know. But I think John Hurt said to me, he goes, I love first-time directors. I hate second-time directors.
Did he? What happened second time? They think they know it all.
Just, total know-it-all, you know. But it was a really good experience. I mean, it was very dark, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of complex problems which would take me another 2 hours to kind of elucidate, clearly, you know. But it was a really good, because Steve Golin was a really great producer, and he supported the director.
Yeah.
And that's something that's pretty rare.
So what did you learn from that whole experience?
I think just the script.
Where did you come away?
It was just, you know, the script. It's about perfecting the script, you know. And if there's any doubts that you have about a script, they're going to become tenfold when you get to the edit.
Right.
They're going to any sneaking doubts you're trying to brush out of your head and ignore, hoping they'll go away, like the girl had to take her clothes off.
So
It's like they'll just come at you, you know. And
so in that, did you have a couple of doubts in the beginning, and they sort of just?
I had several doubts about it. And the two writers had fallen out, and they weren't speaking to each other.
Right.
And it was really hard to crack it, and it was really complex. It was very challenging, you know. But
I think it's on Netflix at the moment, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it might be on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Got a long tout, you know.
Yeah.
It's still around.
It has a sort of little following of people who like sort of F and C bombs.
Yeah, I mean, I was thrown mainly because it just didn't seem. It wasn't what I was expecting. It didn't seem like you. I don't know what I would have guessed that you would have done, but
yeah,
I suppose I obviously some of those early little short films I remember you made that we did ads for, like the girl in the back window or whatever it's called, Rear Window.
Oh yes, yeah.
What was the one before that? There was like a little set of them.
Yeah, it was Sister Ruth, the one I made. Yeah,
then you were going to do one on Uncle Monty, weren't you? Which is a shame because it's one of my favourite films with Neil and I.
Oh, well, you introduced me to that film in.
Did I?
Yeah, in Scotland we watched that.
I love that. Uncle Monty. Really?
Yeah.
What, when we were shooting at Kawasaki?
Yeah, we watched with Nell and I.
Oh
my God. I mean, you know, a friend of mine was the AD on that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, that's just, I still talk about that movie.
Oh, it's
George
amazing,
Harrison produced it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, love that movie.
My friend was going to produce the follow-up to that.
Oh, really?
About 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
But I don't know.
I mean, it's just
giving away any trade secrets. But what's his name who wrote it? Bruce Robinson.
Yeah.
Wouldn't write on what's the software you're supposed to write on so that
On
you can
Final
type
Draft,
it.
yeah.
Well, he wouldn't work on Final Draft, only on paper. And it became a real problem for the studio. Yeah. But it was the sort of follow-up. I think it was the before that. I can't remember. It was the follow-up, either before or after. But
you think about, you know, handmade films, George Harrison.
Oh, yeah, they made some great films.
You know, it was like, it would never get hard to make that film now, you know.
But I can imagine that you doing that, for example.
Yeah, that would have...
Rather than a much more serious, sweary.
Know, I think getting a film made is like, it's whether it's good or bad.
It's like American.
It's just fucking, you know, it's just outstanding, you know. Even if it's a disaster, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, so for me, it was really working with those guys. I mean, really fun. It was really, I have to say, every day was amazing. And cutting it was really interesting. You know, it was like a long journey in the edit.
Yeah.
You know, it was really intense.
But what about the next one? Obviously, James Caan.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Steve warned me about don't do this. You know,
did he? Why is that?
Yeah, it was. There's just, I'm not sure if the conditions were right, but I really enjoyed. Again, I really enjoyed it. Keanu was very nice and helpful. You know, I think what mistake I made with that was I went between genres, which is really tricky. You know, it's like it should have either been much more of a comedy, Frank Capra or Preston Sturges, and then, but there was a malaise of sort of depression hanging over the film, which I couldn't shake off, and I think there was a lot going on in Keanu's life at that point. But James Caan was brilliant.
What was he like?
Tough.
Was he?
Yeah, he's really hardcore, hard-boiled, you know, but great. I mean, I really liked him, but you have to be prepared, you know, to deal with him. But Vera Farmiga was...
she's great.
I mean, I remember I'd seen her in The Departed, and I was just so intoxicated by her. And when we sent her the script, she rang me and she said, "Can I get on this project?" And I was like, "Yes, you're on it." You know. But it was like, again, a lot of fun making it, you know, again, putting it together with the elements. You know, I really enjoyed the conceit of it. Whether it worked or not in the end, I'm not sure. But, yeah, we had fun. Went to a few festivals with it.
Yeah, amazing. So, how do we end? So, how do you find the business today, advertising that is?
I mean, it's really difficult. It's really,
I miss different, doesn't it?
I miss the kind of creative family that I've
Yeah.
kind of developed here in London. I miss creatives, actually. I miss creative teams. I miss the process, so I'm a bit nostalgic for that. And I'm desperate, I love, like, when I get a script in, it's just so exciting to be able to dissect it, break it down and imagine it. And, and it's sort of a dream working on an ad. And so I miss that process a little bit. I've been making these, like, drama documentaries for the History Channel. I've done 3 and possibly have to do another one. And they're really interesting for me personally, because Abraham Lincoln means so much to me, and Teddy Roosevelt, all these people, like these American presidents, they're just such vital people.
Yeah.
And so I'm really enjoying that, working on that. But I miss, as I said, I miss the community. Like doing ads in the States, it's complex because you've got clients are spread everywhere, and you've got all kinds of different layers and decision makers.
Yeah.
Remember we worked on that thing for D&AD about how to get.
Funny enough, I found that the other day. Jesus, it's like 40 pages long. It was going to be a film on how to get good ads, mate.
It was how to get along with your agency. It was
with
Anthony, Anthony Simmons Gooding. And it's full of really good ideas, isn't it?
I sort of got a script of it that's...
Yeah, it was...
I was just amazed at how long it is.
It was, you can't do your best work from the kneeling position.
Is that what it was? Was it all these tips that we turned into a film?
The other one was treat your agency as a partner,
not a supplier.
Yeah. And then it was, what was the other one? It was full of these simple instructions to a client of how to get along with your agency, which is, it's all eye to eye. It was all, and that was all gone now. It's all vanished. There's so many decisions. Keep the decision makers down to a few. Keep the decision makers down to a few as possible. Nowadays, the decision making process is it's such a headache.
Yeah. I
mean, I did an ad for Chase Manhattan Bank, and what I did was I kept the camera, I locked the camera off, and I did all these changes with time changes in someone's apartment or bedroom, I think. And the client wanted, I did it purposely so there was no way of manipulating.
Yeah.
They just want control. I'm wondering where the power lays now.
Well, I think it's it seems to have changed a lot. I mean, hopefully it'll change again. I don't know, but it feels like it's very much supplier.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the big change from when we started this is that anybody can now take their own pictures and do their own bit of film. So although they can't do it very well, there's a sort of demystifying element where you think, I could shoot it. It wouldn't be as good, but is it worth paying 1,000 times more for that person or this person?
Right.
So I don't know.
I it's kind of a joke, but I always tell agencies, why don't you spend more and take less? And it always creates them, right?
Spend more and take less profit.
So no, take less images.
Oh, I know.
Spend more money on your images, because they become more crafted and more thoughtful and more impactful and more emotional. They always want more for less, and it just looks so rushed.
Well, I think there's also, I don't know whether you find this, but with digital photography, what I've noticed is some really good photographers who I would have worked with in the last 5 years, who I might have worked with 15 or 20 years ago, whereas before the shoot would be a little bit stressful. It would have been, there might have been a disagreement. Should it be, should the angle be slightly taller? Should it be further back? Should there be a tension point about some disagreement, and the client may want something and you argue, and then at the end you get to it. Whereas now it's like, it's all friendly and it's like, oh yeah, we'll knock one of those off. And you go, the client said, could we have one in blue? You go, yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Everyone's so amenable. Well, there's no, it's like, it takes no time.
Yeah.
Could we have it? Yep, we'll cover it off if you want that later.
Yeah.
So it feels like, to me, they're not quite paying attention. It's like a supplier thing where you go, yeah, everyone's happy. Yeah. There's all the bits and pieces like Jigsaw. Do what you want. It's fine. Rather than, is this the best thing? Is that the best frame? Like you're talking about not cropping pictures or Henry Cartier press. And it's not, if you, in a way, I did consider for one shoot, should I say I only want one image back? I don't want anything other than one image. Because sometimes you get all these bits back, you think, I've got to cut all these out and put it back together like a jigsaw. Just give me one picture and make that. And I sort of thought, is that possible now to say, just give me one?
Yeah.
and I'll use that.
Oh, they'd lose your mind.
Because then you have to really concentrate on
Yeah.
is it all there rather than piece it all together.
Yeah.
Because they don't seem to be better when in a way you're piecing them all together because you've got all the perfect bits, but you put them all together, you don't think, well, that's now perfect. It's just don't know. Do you notice that? Obviously, because we started where you're going, you're looking for one frame that isn't cropped even.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
So it feels less precious.
Mark Reddy said to me when I first started directing, he called me and he went, "Oh, you're doing your first ad, good luck. Don't forget to have a tantrum, like throw a chair or something if you don't."
To keep people at bay.
It was like, that's what directors did in those days. It was like, you like smash things up,
Yeah. That happens much.
Doesn't happen now because you get blacklisted,
Well, I remember when Frank Budgeon did a thing for CDD for Mercedes, and there was a meeting at one point when the problem is every time someone would say to Frank, could you do this or could you do that? He'd go, yeah, and then carry on. And then they'd go, oh shit, he's not done anything we asked. So he would just agree with everything, but just do exactly what he wanted. Yeah. But really amenable and pleasant. He'd go, yeah. And then just do what he was doing anyway. And it really freaked them because they think it wasn't like he was throwing a tantrum, but equally he was just doing what he wanted. Yeah. And going, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, Frank was amazing that way.
Carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he had that way about him, because he was able to do that. Yeah. He was really, clever.
It's clever because it's very non-confrontational.
Yeah.
But equally just 100% what he wanted.
Remember when Mark and Chris did Can You Kick It with Tony Kaye? I remember being in the agency when they were coming back, tearing their hair out. Well, not Mark, obviously, but like losing their minds. Because Tony had just run away with the idea. And of course, when they got to the edit, it was brilliant. But it wasn't what they...
So had they seen a first edit? And because I know there was a sort of... There's no story in it anymore. The idea's gone. Yeah. But it was so visceral and magnetic to watch.
Yeah, but Tony was just...
And the music was brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember when Tom Watt did Dunlop?
Yeah.
A friend of mine was working at, I think, the Mill or something, and he said, I've just seen a rough edit of Dunlop. It's black and white. And it's terrible. It's awful. And, look, they coloured it and they put Velvet Underground on it.
Yeah.
Boom.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, good.
Let's end on a positive note. So what's good about where we're heading with the business?
I think, it's really interesting talking about disabilities. I've written a script in sign language. Yeah. And I've never been able to get...
You've written a script in sign language? What do you mean?
It's a story about my godfather who went on a road trip in the 40s. It's really interesting. And it's all in sign. All the dialogue's in sign. Oh, wow. And I've been trying to make this movie for a long time, and no one wanted to touch it. People used to laugh at me, like deaf actors, and I've got this... Because of Strictly, has it changed the landscape? It's changing it now. Sign language is becoming an official language, and I need a lot of money to make this film. And it would normally be impossible, but right now I've got a disabilities advocate who's saying to you, I can get you disabled crew and deaf actors. Wow. And this, it might happen, with proper money. So there is something really interesting about the world right now. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So has that affected it? The Strictly thing? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That has massively affected it. That little, a few minutes of silence and changed a lot of stuff, hasn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's like there's a demand for presence of disability, and I've been trying. Again, Steve Golin loved this idea, and he brought me out to LA. Put me in an apartment and I wrote it. Amazing. And we almost got it made, but with the hearing actors, it was a disaster. Was it what the hearing actors pretending deaf to people? Be? Yeah, it would have been just a disaster. But now, because there only used to be one, didn't there? Marley Matlin. Marley Matlin, yeah. Yeah. Have you seen that film Coda? No. It's an Apple film and she's in it. Right. It's going to be nominated for Best Picture. Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, it's a very heartwarming story, but. She's around. She has a production company, So that's really positive. Yeah, good. Well, good luck with it. All right. Thanks for coming in. That was brilliant. Cheers, Mel. Cheers, Dave. That was great. That was really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.